I was just checking on my husband's brother after his divorce, but he flipped the whole story and fake screenshots to make me look like I was after him. The worst part is my husband knew about it before I did and said nothing. My husband Darren, 38M, is not a bad person. I want to make that clear from the start. He is not cruel or mean in the way people usually describe in these posts. He is just passive. He avoids conflict. He does not like to rock the boat with his family, and his family is very close. His mother, Mila, 64F, is the center of everything. Every Sunday dinner, every holiday, every birthday, Mila is in charge. His sister, Monica, 35F, lives 10 minutes away from Mila and is there almost daily. Darren's older brother, Flint, 41M, lives about an hour away but shows up for all the big events. Flint and his wife, Donna, 39F, divorced 2 years ago. That was a big deal in the family. Mila took it hard. Donna had been the one bringing in good money. She worked in corporate sales and they had a nice house in a suburb outside the city, 2 cars, the whole thing. After the divorce, Flint moved into a smaller apartment. He stopped driving the BMW. He stopped showing up to things looking put together. He started coming to Sunday dinners looking like he had not slept in days. Mila kept saying he was going through a rough time and everyone needed to be patient with him. I had no problem with that. Flint and I were never close, but I was not against him either. He was just Darren's brother. I would say hi, ask how things were going, and that was about it. The trouble started in March of last year. Mila called Darren one evening and asked if someone in the family could check on Flint because he had not been answering her calls for a few days. Darren did not want to drive out there alone, so he suggested that I go with him. We drove to Flint's apartment, knocked on the door, and he opened it. He looked rough. His hair was unwashed, his apartment was messy, and there were dishes piled in the sink. He let us in and we sat with him for about an hour. He did not say much. Darren asked if he needed anything and Flint said no. We left. After that, Darren started suggesting that I keep in touch with Flint on my own. The reasoning was simple. Darren works long hours at the warehouse and often comes home tired. He said it would be easier if I just texted Flint now and then to check on him, since I was home during the day and had more free time. I work from home doing data entry, so I did have the time. I said fine. I started texting Flint a few times a week. How are you? Did you eat today? That kind of thing. After a week or so, he suggested meeting up at a cafe near his apartment. I told Darren about it. He said that sounded fine, go ahead. So I went. The cafe was small and quiet. Flint was already there when I arrived. He had a coffee in front of him and looked slightly better than the last time I saw him. We talked for about an hour. Mostly he talked about how the divorce messed up his finances, how he felt like a failure, how Mila kept trying to fix him up with other women and he did not want that. I mostly listened. I asked questions here and there. It was not an uncomfortable conversation. It felt normal. We started meeting at the cafe once a week after that. Sometimes twice. It became a routine. Flint would talk, I would listen. Sometimes I would tell him small things about my own life, nothing major, just to keep the conversation from feeling one-sided. He seemed to appreciate it. He started looking better. He was shaving again. He was wearing clean clothes. I did not think anything of it at the time. Looking back, there were small things I did not pay attention to. Once, at a Sunday dinner, Flint leaned over and told me that the scarf I was wearing suited me. I thanked him and moved on. Another time, when I was leaving the cafe after one of our meetings, he said something about how Darren was a lucky man. I said, thanks and left. I did not think about those comments for more than a second. The thing that changed everything happened on a Thursday evening in May. Darren had gone to his mother's house to help her with something in the yard. I was home alone when Flint called me. Not texted. Called. I picked up. He said he wanted to talk to me about something in person and asked if I could come to his place. I said sure, why not? When I got there, he made coffee and we sat at his small kitchen table. He was fidgeting. Kept picking up his coffee cup and putting it down. Then he said it. He said that he had feelings for me and that he thought I felt the same way. He said we had a connection that was different from what I had with Darren. He said Darren would not have to find out. I put my coffee down. I told him no. I told him that was not happening and that I was married to his brother. I stood up and left. I did not say anything else. I drove home and sat in the car in the driveway for a few minutes before going inside. That night, I told Darren that Flint had said something inappropriate to me and that I did not want to see him anymore. Darren asked what he said. I told him the basics. Darren went quiet for a long time. Then he said he would handle it. I did not ask what that meant. He did not bring it up again for days. I stopped all contact with Flint after that. I deleted his number. I did not respond to any of his messages. I told Darren again, a few days later, that I thought he should actually talk to Flint about it. Darren said he would, but I do not know if he ever did. For a while after that, things were normal. Or at least they seemed normal. Darren and I went about our days. Sunday dinners continued. Flint showed up looking fine. He did not look at me any differently than before. Mila talked about him like nothing had changed. I started to think maybe it was just a one-time thing and it was over. But it was not over. It was just getting started. I am posting this now because things have gotten out of hand and I do not know what to do. I will post updates as they come. Update 1: for about 2 weeks after my original post, nothing happened. Life went on. I went to work, I cooked dinner, I watched TV with Darren in the evenings. Sunday dinner came and went without any issue. Flint was there. He did not say anything to me. He did not even look my way for too long. I started to think the whole thing had blown over. Then Mila called Darren on a Tuesday and said she wanted to have a family dinner that Friday. Not the usual Sunday dinner. A Friday dinner, specifically. She said it was important. Darren told me about it that evening. He said his mother sounded serious on the phone but did not say what it was about. I did not think much of it. Mila liked to organize things and sometimes the reasons were small. Friday came. We drove to Mila's house together. Monica was already there when we arrived, and she was in the kitchen helping Mila set the table. Flint was sitting in the living room with a glass of water. When I walked in, he looked up at me and then quickly looked away. I noticed that, but did not say anything. Dinner was quiet for the first half. Mila asked about everyone's week. Monica talked about her kids. Darren ate and nodded along. I did the same. Then, about halfway through the meal, Mila put her fork down. She looked at Darren and then at me. She said that Flint had come to her the week before and told her something that upset him very much. She said she did not want to believe it but that she felt she had to address it because it was affecting the family. I put my fork down too. Mila said that Flint had told her that I had been pursuing him. That I had been the one pushing for the meetings at the cafe. That I had been sending him messages that were more than friendly. That when he finally told me to stop, I did not take it well. The table went silent. I looked at Darren. He was staring at his plate. I looked at Flint. He was looking at Mila, not at me. Mila said she had seen some of the messages. Flint had shown them to her on his phone. She said the messages looked like I was the one interested in him, not the other way around. I told Mila that what Flint said was not true. I told her that it was the opposite. That Flint was the one who asked to meet up, that Flint was the one who made the comments, and that Flint was the one who told me he had feelings for me. I told her I had told Darren about it weeks ago. Everyone looked at Darren. Darren said he was not sure what exactly happened. He said he did not want to take sides. Monica said nothing. She just looked back and forth between me and Flint. Mila said she was not accusing anyone of lying. She said she just wanted the truth to come out. Then she said that Flint had shown her photos too. Photos of me and Flint at the cafe, sitting across from each other, sometimes with our jackets off, sometimes leaning forward in conversation. The photos looked like something out of a dating app profile if you did not know the context. I told Mila those were just photos from our regular meetings. The ones Darren had told me to go to. The ones I had told Darren about every single time. Mila nodded but did not say anything else. The dinner ended shortly after that. Nobody talked much on the drive home. That night, Darren sat on the edge of the bed and said he thought I should have been more careful about how the meetings looked. He said from the outside, it did not look great. I asked him if he believed me. He said he did not think I was lying, but he also said he did not think Flint had any reason to lie either. I asked him what that meant. He said he did not know. The next few days were strange. Mila called me once and asked if we could talk privately. We met at her house when Darren was at work. She showed me what Flint had sent her. It was a series of text messages, but only my side of the conversation. Just my replies. Without seeing what Flint had written to prompt those replies, my messages looked overly friendly. Things like yes, sounds good, I will be there, looking forward to it. Taken out of context, and paired with the photos, it did look like I was the one chasing him. I told Mila I could show her the full thread. She said okay. I pulled up the conversation on my phone, but I had deleted Flint's number and the messages had been cleared from my end weeks before. I had done that right after the incident at his apartment. So the full thread was gone from my phone. Mila looked at me for a long time after that. I went home and told Darren about the meeting with Mila. He said I should have kept the messages. I said I did not know I was going to need them. He did not respond to that. Monica texted me that evening. She said she did not know what to think. She said Flint had been very convincing. She said she was sorry she could not be more helpful right now. I read the message and put my phone down. By the end of that week, I had stopped going to Mila's house. I had stopped responding to Monica's texts. Darren and I were still living in the same house but we were not talking much beyond the basics. He would ask if I wanted dinner. I would say yes or no. That was about the extent of it. I posted this update because people in the comments of my original post asked what happened next. This is what happened. It is not over yet. Update 2: a few days after the dinner at Mila's, Monica called me. Not texted. Called. She said she wanted to meet up and talk. We met at a different cafe, one that neither of us usually went to. She looked uncomfortable from the moment she sat down. She told me that after the Friday dinner, she had gone back to Flint and asked him to show her the full conversation, not just the screenshots he had given Mila. She said she pushed him on it because something did not add up. The way Flint had described the situation did not match the way the screenshots looked, even to her. Flint did not want to show her at first. He kept saying there was nothing else to see. Monica said she kept asking until he finally showed her his phone. The full thread was still there on his end. Monica pulled out her own phone and showed me screenshots she had taken of Flint's screen. The full conversation. Every message from both sides. I read through them right there at the table. The messages told a completely different story from what Flint had shown Mila. In almost every exchange, it was Flint who initiated. He was the one who suggested the cafe. He was the one who asked me to come over. He was the one who sent the longer messages. My replies were short because I was just responding to what he had written. The friendly tone of my messages made sense once you could see what he had said to me first. There was one exchange in particular that stood out. About a week before the incident at his apartment, Flint had sent me a message saying something along the lines of thanking me for being the only person who actually listened to him and that he looked forward to seeing me more than anyone else. My reply was just a thank you and a suggestion to see him that weekend. Without his message, my reply looked like I was the one pushing to see him. With his message, it was just a normal response. Monica put her phone down and looked at me. She said she was sorry. She said she had believed Flint at first because he is her brother and she had no reason to doubt him. But now she could see what he had done. He had carefully picked which parts of the conversation to show Mila and skipped everything that would have made him look like the one who started it. I asked Monica if she had told Mila. She said not yet. She said she wanted to talk to me first to make sure she understood the situation correctly. We sat there for a while after that. Monica ordered another coffee. She told me something else. She said that after the Friday dinner, she had also asked Darren privately if he had known about what Flint was claiming before the dinner. Darren had told Monica that he had known for about a week before Mila organized the dinner. Mila had called him first, before the dinner, and told him what Flint had said. Darren had not told me any of that. So Darren knew about the accusations before I did. He knew Mila was going to bring it up at dinner. He sat there and let it happen without saying a word beforehand. I told Monica I needed to go. She nodded. She said she would figure out what to do next about the messages and that she would be in touch. I drove home. Darren was in the living room watching something on TV. I sat down across from him and told him what Monica had shown me. I told him that Flint had manipulated the messages. I told him that Darren had known about the accusations before the dinner and had not told me. Darren muted the TV. He said he did not want to get involved between me and his brother. He said this was between me and Flint and that he hoped it would sort itself out. He said he did not want to make things worse with his family. I asked him directly if he believed me. He said yes, he believed me, but that believing me and doing something about it were two different things. He said if he went after Flint, it would cause a split in the family, and he did not want that on his hands. I told him that his brother had lied to the entire family about me and that he was doing nothing about it. He said he knew. He said he was sorry. I went to the bedroom and closed the door. I did not come out for the rest of the evening. The next morning, I called Monica and asked her to send me the screenshots she had taken of the full conversation. She sent them within the hour. I saved them. I also asked her if she had any of the photos Flint had shown Mila, the ones of us at the cafe. She did not have those, but she said she could ask Mila for them. Things at home did not change after that conversation with Darren. We moved around each other in the house without much interaction. He left for work in the morning and came back in the evening. I did my work from home. We did not eat dinner together most nights. I started eating earlier and he ate later. I posted this update because Monica's findings changed a lot of what I thought was happening. But knowing the truth and getting anyone else to act on it turned out to be two very different things. Update 3: Monica did something I did not expect. She sent the full screenshots, the ones she had taken of Flint's phone showing the complete conversation, to the family group chat. All of it. Mila, Darren, Flint, and a few other family members were all in it. She did not write anything long with it. She just sent the images and wrote one line saying that people should look at the full conversation before making up their minds. I found out about it when Mila called me. She called me, not Darren. She said she had just seen what Monica sent. She said she had read through everything. She went quiet for a long time on the phone. Then she said she owed me an apology. She said she should have asked more questions before believing Flint. She said she was sorry. I thanked her and we hung up. I did not see what the rest of the group chat looked like. Darren did not show me. But Monica told me later that Flint had sent a message saying the screenshots were taken out of context and that Monica had no right to share them. A couple of other family members backed him up, saying that even if the messages were real, it did not prove anything for certain. Mila did not reply to any of that. She went silent in the chat. Darren did not send a single message in the group chat about any of it. A few days after the group chat blew up, Darren came home from work and sat down at the kitchen table. He said he wanted to talk. He said he knew things had been bad between us and that he wanted to try to fix it. He suggested we go somewhere together for a weekend, just the two of us, to try to work things out. I looked at him for a while before I said anything. Then I told him that I did not think a weekend trip was going to change anything. I told him that the problem was not that we needed time together. The problem was that when his brother lied about me to the whole family, Darren chose to say nothing. Not because he did not believe me. He said he did believe me. He chose to say nothing because he did not want to cause conflict with his family. And that choice told me everything I needed to know about where I stood. He did not argue with that. He just sat there. I told him I was going to stay with my friend Naomi, 42F, for a while. Naomi lives in the city and had already told me I could stay with her whenever I needed to. I had already packed a bag 2 days before that conversation. I had already called Naomi. I had already looked into my options. Darren asked how long I would be gone. I told him I did not know yet. I moved into Naomi's spare room that same evening. Darren texted me once the next morning asking if I got there safely. I said yes. He did not text again after that. About a week into staying at Naomi's, Monica called to check on me. She told me that Flint had been quiet since the group chat incident. He had not shown up to Mila's house in over a week. Mila was not returning his calls. Monica said Mila seemed more upset about the fact that Flint had manipulated her than about anything else. Mila had trusted him and he had used that trust to make me look bad, and that bothered her more than the original situation. Monica also told me that she had spoken to Darren a few days before. She said Darren had told her he felt stuck. That he did not know how to handle the situation without losing either me or his brother. Monica said she told Darren that he had already lost me by doing nothing, and that he needed to understand that. I do not know what Darren said to that. Monica did not tell me and I did not ask. As of right now, I am still at Naomi's place. I have started looking at apartments in the city. Darren and I have not had any real conversation in about 2 weeks. He has not come by Naomi's house. He has not called. He sent one text asking if I needed anything from the house and I said no. Mila called me once more last week. She said she wanted to have lunch, just the two of us. I told her I would think about it. I have not called her back yet. I am not sure what happens next. But I do know that I am not going back to that house and pretending everything is fine. That part is done. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My sister thinks she's the boss at every job and got fired again. Now she's blaming everyone else but herself and tearing our family apart while living with our aunt. My sister Rebecca, 28F, has been unemployed for the past 6 months, and before that, she lasted exactly 3 weeks at a retail job. This pattern has been going on for years now. She gets hired somewhere, things seem fine for a few days, then something happens and she either quits or gets fired. I'm her brother Jackson, 31M, and I've been hearing about these workplace disasters for the past 5 years. Rebecca lives with our parents because she can't afford her own place. Mom and Dad keep giving her money and making excuses for her. They say she's just unlucky or that employers these days don't appreciate good workers. But I've seen what really happens. Rebecca has this idea in her head that no matter what job she takes, she's automatically in charge of something. She doesn't understand the difference between being an employee and being a manager. Rebecca went to community college for 2 years and got an associate degree in business administration. She thinks this makes her qualified to run any business she walks into. The problem is she's never actually managed anyone or owned anything. She's worked as a cashier, a server, a stock clerk, and a receptionist. But in her mind, she's always been management material who just happened to be doing other tasks temporarily. Our parents don't see it because Rebecca tells them her version of what happens at work. In her stories, she's always the responsible one trying to help improve the business while lazy coworkers and unreasonable bosses hold her back. She makes it sound like every workplace is chaotic and unprofessional except for her. Mom and Dad believe her because they want to support their daughter. But I live in the same town as Rebecca, and I hear the real stories from people who work with her. 3 jobs ago, she worked at a coffee shop. The owner told me Rebecca spent her shifts rearranging the menu board and telling customers about better ways to make drinks instead of just taking orders. She argued with her supervisor about inventory procedures and insisted on reorganizing the storage room without permission. She lasted 2 weeks. Before that, she worked at a clothing store where she decided the mannequins were dressed wrong and changed all the displays during her lunch break. She also created her own filing system for customer returns because she thought the existing one was inefficient. The manager had to spend hours fixing everything Rebecca had reorganized. She got fired after 10 days. The worst part is Rebecca genuinely doesn't understand why these things keep happening to her. She comes home and complains about how other people don't appreciate her initiative and leadership skills. She talks about her coworkers like they're beneath her and her supervisors like they're incompetent. She never considers that maybe she's the problem. Last month, Rebecca got a job at a small accounting firm. It's owned by this guy named Kenneth, 45M, who has 2 other employees. Rebecca was hired as a filing clerk and data entry person. Basic stuff, organize documents, input numbers into spreadsheets, answer phones sometimes. The pay was decent for entry-level work, and Kenneth seemed like a reasonable boss. For the first week, everything went fine. Rebecca came home talking about how professional the office was and how much potential she saw for improving their systems. I should have known this was a warning sign, but I was just glad she was working again. The problem started in the second week. Kenneth has a routine where he comes in early, works through the morning, then takes a break around 2 p.m. when things slow down. He usually sits in his office with the door open, drinks coffee, and returns phone calls or reads industry newsletters. The other two employees, Linda, 35F, and James, 29M, have been there for years and know this is just how Kenneth operates. He's the owner, so he sets his own schedule. Rebecca saw Kenneth taking these afternoon breaks and decided she should get the same privilege. But instead of asking about break policies or additional break time, she just started taking extended breaks whenever Kenneth did. She would leave her desk, go to the break room, and read magazines or scroll through her phone for 30 or 40 minutes at a time. Linda noticed this and mentioned it to Rebecca. She explained that everyone gets a 15-minute break in the morning and 30 minutes for lunch, plus they can take short bathroom breaks as needed. She told Rebecca that Kenneth's schedule was different because he owns the business. Rebecca listened to this explanation and then told Linda she appreciated the information but that she understood her role in the office. The next day, Rebecca took another long break during Kenneth's quiet time. James asked her if she was feeling okay because she'd been away from her desk for almost an hour. Rebecca told him she was fine and that she was just managing her time efficiently like Kenneth does. This went on for 3 more days. Rebecca would work normally in the morning, then basically disappear for long periods in the afternoon. Her filing was getting behind, and phone calls were going unanswered. Kenneth started noticing because clients were mentioning that no one answered when they called, and there were stacks of documents that should have been processed days earlier. Kenneth called Rebecca into his office and asked her about her work schedule. He wanted to know why her tasks weren't getting completed and why she was spending so much time away from her desk. Rebecca told him she was keeping the same schedule as everyone else in the office. Kenneth explained that her job responsibilities required her to be available during business hours and that her work was falling behind. Rebecca's response was that she was modeling her behavior after his leadership style. She said she noticed he took time for strategic thinking and planning during the day, and she was doing the same thing. She told Kenneth she was using her break time to consider ways to improve office efficiency and client communication. Kenneth stared at her for a few seconds, then explained that he takes breaks because he owns the company and works 12-hour days. He told Rebecca that her job was to complete specific tasks during specific hours, and that her breaks needed to follow the employee handbook policies that he'd given her on her first day. Rebecca nodded like she understood, but the next afternoon she took another extended break. This time she brought a notebook and sat in the break room writing down ideas for improving the office filing system. When Kenneth found her there, she showed him her notes and suggested they schedule a meeting to discuss her proposals for workplace improvements. Kenneth asked Rebecca to come back to his office. He sat her down and explained that she was hired to do filing and data entry, not to redesign business processes. He told her that her job performance was unacceptable and that she needed to focus on completing her assigned tasks. He said if she couldn't follow the break schedule and finish her work, he would have to find someone else. Rebecca came home that night and told our parents that Kenneth was threatened by her business education and leadership potential. She said he was trying to keep her down because he was afraid she might expose problems with how he runs his company. She complained that Kenneth was micromanaging her and not allowing her to contribute her skills and knowledge. Mom and Dad were sympathetic and told Rebecca to hang in there because good employees always face challenges from insecure bosses. They said Kenneth probably wasn't used to having someone with Rebecca's education and qualifications working for him. But I could see what was really happening. Rebecca was not doing the job she was hired to do. She was creating problems and then acting like she was the victim when her boss tried to correct her behavior. She was treating Kenneth like he was just another coworker instead of the person who signs her paychecks. The situation came to a head 2 days later. Kenneth was having a busy morning with client meetings and phone calls. Rebecca was supposed to be organizing quarterly tax documents that needed to be filed by the end of the week. Instead, she spent 2 hours reorganizing the supply closet because she thought the current system was inefficient. When Kenneth realized the tax documents weren't done, he found Rebecca labeling shelves in the supply closet. He asked her why she wasn't working on the priority project he'd assigned her. Rebecca explained that she'd noticed the supply organization was causing workflow problems, so she decided to fix it first before moving on to the filing project. Kenneth told Rebecca to stop working on the supply closet and get back to the tax documents immediately. Rebecca said she understood his concern but that she was almost finished with the closet project and it would only take another hour. She said once the supplies were properly organized, everyone would be more efficient. Kenneth raised his voice and told Rebecca that the tax documents had to be completed today and that she needed to stop reorganizing things and do her actual job. Rebecca responded that she was doing her job and that part of being a good employee means identifying and solving problems that affect the whole team. That's when Kenneth lost his patience. He told Rebecca that she was fired and needed to collect her things and leave immediately. Rebecca asked why she was being fired when she was trying to help improve the business. Kenneth said she was being fired because she wouldn't follow instructions and couldn't understand what her job responsibilities were. Rebecca packed up her desk and left. She came home that afternoon and told our parents that Kenneth had fired her for being too competent and making him look bad. She said he couldn't handle having an employee who understood business operations better than he did. Our parents were outraged and wanted to call Kenneth to complain about how he treated Rebecca. They talked about filing complaints with the labor department and leaving bad reviews for his business online. I tried to explain that maybe Rebecca had done something wrong, but they wouldn't listen to me. The thing that bothers me most is that Rebecca genuinely believes she was right and Kenneth was wrong. She thinks she lost her job because she was too good at it, not because she was terrible at it. She's already started applying for new jobs, and she's going to do the exact same thing again. I don't know how to help her because she won't admit there's a problem. She thinks every boss she's ever had was incompetent or threatened by her abilities. She can't see that the common factor in all these situations is her own behavior. Our parents enable this by taking her side every time and giving her money so she doesn't have to face real consequences. Rebecca has never had to worry about paying rent or buying groceries because mom and dad always bail her out. She can afford to quit jobs or get fired because she knows someone will take care of her. I'm watching my sister ruin her life, and I don't know what to do about it. Update 1. I thought I should update everyone on what's been happening with Rebecca since my last post. Things have gotten worse, and now it's affecting our whole family. After Rebecca got fired from the accounting firm, she spent about 2 weeks applying for jobs and complaining about how unfair her previous boss had been. She had 3 interviews during that time, and I was hoping maybe she'd learned something from what happened with Kenneth. The first interview was for a receptionist position at a dentist office. Rebecca came home saying the interview went great and that the office manager was impressed with her business background. She said they discussed her ideas for improving patient scheduling and office organization. I should have known this was a bad sign. Rebecca didn't get that job. When she called to ask why, they told her they were looking for someone who wanted to focus on reception duties rather than management consulting. Rebecca interpreted this as them being intimidated by her qualifications. The second interview was at a local insurance agency for a customer service role. Rebecca said this interview also went well and that she'd shared several suggestions for improving their client communication systems. She didn't get this job either. They told her they needed someone who was comfortable following established procedures rather than creating new ones. The third interview was at a small law firm for a paralegal assistant position. Rebecca was excited about this one because she thought working at a law firm would be more professional and that lawyers would appreciate her analytical skills. She came home talking about all the ways she could help them improve their case management and client relations. She didn't get this job either. The office manager called her personally to explain that they were looking for someone who could work independently on assigned tasks without trying to redesign their existing systems. At this point, Rebecca had been unemployed for almost a month. Our parents were getting worried about her job search, but they still believed the problem was with employers not recognizing her value. Mom started suggesting that Rebecca might need to look for management positions instead of entry-level jobs. This is where things got complicated. Rebecca took Mom's advice seriously and started applying for supervisor and coordinator positions. She updated her resume to emphasize her business degree and describe her previous jobs as leadership experience. She wrote cover letters explaining how she'd identified problems and implemented solutions at her previous workplaces. Rebecca got an interview for an assistant manager position at a retail chain store. The district manager interviewed her along with the store manager. Rebecca came home convinced she was going to get the job because the interview had lasted over an hour and they'd asked detailed questions about her management philosophy and leadership style. She actually got this job. The district manager called her 2 days later and offered her the assistant manager position. Rebecca was thrilled, and our parents threw a little celebration dinner. Everyone was relieved that Rebecca had finally found a workplace that appreciated her abilities. Rebecca's first day went well. The store manager, Kevin, 38M, showed her around and explained the basic responsibilities. She would be supervising 4 part-time employees, handling customer complaints, managing inventory orders, and covering for Kevin during his days off. The pay was significantly better than her previous jobs, and she would get benefits after 90 days. For the first week, Rebecca seemed genuinely happy with the job. She came home talking about her team members and the improvements she wanted to make to store operations. I was cautiously optimistic that maybe she'd finally found the right fit. The problem started in the second week. Rebecca decided that the store's employee schedule was inefficient and created a new rotation system without discussing it with Kevin first. She posted the new schedule and told her team members that the changes would improve coverage during busy hours. 2 of the employees couldn't work the shifts Rebecca had assigned them because of childcare commitments they'd discussed when they were hired. 1 employee was in college and had specifically been hired to work around her class schedule. Rebecca told them they needed to be more flexible if they wanted to succeed in retail. Kevin found out about the schedule changes when one of the employees called him at home to ask if she was going to be fired for not being able to work the hours Rebecca had assigned her. Kevin came in early the next day and had to redo the entire schedule to accommodate everyone's availability. Kevin pulled Rebecca aside and explained that employee scheduling had to be coordinated with him because he was responsible for labor costs and compliance with availability requirements. He told Rebecca that any major changes to store operations needed his approval first. Rebecca apologized and said she understood, but the next day she implemented a new customer service protocol without clearing it with Kevin. She created a checklist for handling returns and exchanges that was more complicated than the company's standard procedure. She trained her team members on the new system and told them it would reduce customer complaints. The new system actually slowed down transactions and confused customers who were familiar with the normal return process. Kevin started getting complaints from customers about long wait times and inconsistent policies. When he investigated, he discovered Rebecca had changed the procedures without authorization. Kevin had another conversation with Rebecca about following company policies and getting approval for changes. Rebecca explained that she was trying to improve customer satisfaction and that her business education had taught her to identify and solve operational problems. Kevin told Rebecca that her job was to implement existing company policies, not to create new ones. He said if she had suggestions for improvements, she should discuss them with him first so they could evaluate whether changes were appropriate and get proper approval from corporate headquarters. Rebecca agreed to follow Kevin's guidance, but she was frustrated because she felt like he wasn't letting her use her management skills effectively. She started complaining at home about how the company's corporate structure prevented local managers from making necessary improvements. The situation got worse when Rebecca decided to counsel one of her team members about work performance. The employee, Jessica, 19F, was a part-time college student who had been working at the store for 8 months with no previous problems. Jessica occasionally arrived a few minutes late for her shifts because of bus schedule issues, but she always stayed late to make up the time and Kevin had never considered it a problem. Rebecca called Jessica into the office and gave her a formal verbal warning about punctuality. She created a written document outlining expectations for arrival times and had Jessica sign it. Rebecca told Jessica that chronic lateness was unacceptable in a professional environment and that future violations would result in disciplinary action. Jessica was upset because she'd never been told her arrival time was a problem, and she'd always made sure to work her full scheduled hours. She asked Rebecca if Kevin had complained about her performance. Rebecca said that as assistant manager, she was responsible for maintaining team standards and didn't need Kevin's input for routine personnel matters. Jessica called Kevin that evening to ask if she was in trouble and whether she needed to find a different job. Kevin was confused because he'd never had any issues with Jessica's work performance. When Jessica explained about the formal warning and the documentation, Kevin realized Rebecca was conducting unauthorized disciplinary actions. Kevin came in the next morning and asked Rebecca about the situation with Jessica. Rebecca explained that she'd noticed performance issues and taken appropriate management action to address them. She showed Kevin the documentation she'd created and said she was trying to prevent small problems from becoming bigger ones. Kevin told Rebecca that disciplinary actions required his approval and that she couldn't implement formal warnings or create personnel documentation without authorization. He explained that Jessica was a reliable employee who had never caused any problems, and that her occasional late arrivals were within acceptable limits given her transportation situation. Rebecca argued that good management meant holding all employees to high standards and that making exceptions for some people would undermine team discipline. She said Kevin was being too lenient and that his approach would lead to bigger problems down the road. Kevin removed the disciplinary documentation from Jessica's file and told Rebecca that she was not authorized to conduct formal performance reviews or disciplinary actions. He said her job was to supervise daily operations, not to make personnel decisions. Rebecca was angry about this conversation and came home complaining that Kevin was undermining her authority and preventing her from doing her job effectively. She said the store had serious management problems and that Kevin wasn't providing proper leadership. Our parents listened to Rebecca's complaints and agreed that Kevin sounded like a poor manager who was threatened by Rebecca's competence. Dad suggested that Rebecca should document Kevin's interference with her management duties in case she needed to file a complaint with corporate. The final incident happened during Rebecca's third week on the job. The district manager, Patricia, 42F, was scheduled to visit the store for a routine inspection. Kevin told Rebecca that Patricia would be evaluating store operations and that everything needed to be perfect. Rebecca saw this as an opportunity to showcase her management abilities. She came in early and reorganized the stockroom according to her own system. She created new signage for different sections and rearranged products to improve efficiency. She also prepared a presentation for Patricia outlining several suggestions for improving store performance. When Patricia arrived, she noticed immediately that the stockroom layout was different from company standards. Kevin was confused because he hadn't authorized any changes. Patricia asked who had reorganized the stockroom, and Rebecca stepped forward to explain her improvements. Rebecca gave Patricia her presentation, highlighting the problems she'd identified with the current system and the solutions she'd implemented. She suggested that her organizational changes should be adopted company-wide because they would improve efficiency at all locations. Patricia listened politely, then asked Kevin to join her for a private conversation. They went into the office while Rebecca continued supervising the floor, confident that her presentation had impressed the district manager. After Patricia left, Kevin called Rebecca into the office. He told her that Patricia was concerned about unauthorized changes to store operations and that Rebecca's reorganization of the stockroom had violated several company policies about inventory management and safety procedures. Kevin explained that Rebecca was being terminated immediately. He said her position required following established procedures and working within the chain of command, and that she'd consistently failed to meet these basic requirements. Rebecca asked for specific examples of what she'd done wrong. Kevin listed the unauthorized schedule changes, the new customer service procedures, the disciplinary action against Jessica, and the stockroom reorganization. He said each of these incidents demonstrated that Rebecca couldn't follow instructions or work within the company's management structure. Rebecca argued that everything she'd done was intended to improve store operations and that she was being punished for showing initiative and leadership. Kevin said initiative was good, but that it had to be channeled through proper procedures and with appropriate authorization. Rebecca cleaned out her desk and left. She came home that afternoon and told our parents that she'd been fired by a weak manager who felt threatened by her business knowledge and management skills. She said Kevin had sabotaged her with the district manager because he was afraid she would expose his poor leadership. Our parents were furious and wanted to call the corporate office to complain about Kevin and Patricia. Mom said it was obvious that Rebecca was being discriminated against for being too qualified and that the company was probably violating employment laws. I tried to suggest that maybe Rebecca had made some mistakes, but Dad got angry and said I was taking sides against my own sister. He said successful people always face jealousy and resistance from mediocre coworkers, and that Rebecca just needed to find an employer who would appreciate her talents. But I can see what's really happening. Rebecca is doing the same thing at every job. She's acting like she's the owner instead of an employee. She doesn't understand that being hired as a manager doesn't mean she can ignore company policies or make decisions without authorization. She thinks having a title means she can run things however she wants. The worst part is that Rebecca is getting worse instead of better. She's more convinced than ever that her problems are caused by other people's incompetence and insecurity. She's not learning anything from these experiences because she refuses to consider that she might be wrong. Now she's been unemployed for another week, and she's already talking about applying for district manager and regional supervisor positions. She thinks the solution is to find a job with more authority so people can't hold her back anymore. I don't know how to get through to her, and our parents are making it worse by supporting her version of events. Rebecca is heading for bigger disasters, and nobody seems willing to stop her. Update 2: I need to update everyone because the situation with Rebecca has gotten much worse, and now it's tearing our family apart. After Rebecca got fired from the retail manager job, she spent about 3 weeks applying for higher-level positions like she'd planned. She was targeting district manager, regional coordinator, and operations supervisor roles at various companies. Most of these jobs required several years of management experience, but Rebecca was convinced her business degree and natural leadership abilities made her qualified. She didn't get any interviews for these positions. The few companies that responded told her she needed more experience before they could consider her for management roles. Rebecca interpreted this as age discrimination and said companies were illegally excluding qualified candidates based on assumptions about young people. After a month of rejections, Rebecca finally started applying for regular jobs again. She got an interview at a local credit union for a member services representative position. This was basically a bank teller job, helping customers with deposits, withdrawals, account questions, and basic transactions. Rebecca was excited about this opportunity because she said financial services was a more professional industry where her business background would be valued. She spent 2 days preparing for the interview and researching the credit union's services so she could suggest improvements during the interview process. She got the job. The branch manager, Sandra, 45F, called Rebecca the same day and offered her the position. Rebecca would start the following Monday with 2 weeks of training, then begin regular duties helping members at the counter and over the phone. Our parents were relieved that Rebecca was working again. Mom and Dad had been giving her spending money for 2 months, and Dad had made several comments about Rebecca needing to contribute to household expenses if she was going to keep living at home. Rebecca's first week of training went smoothly. She learned the computer systems, memorized product information, and practiced handling different types of transactions. Sandra said Rebecca was picking up the procedures quickly and seemed comfortable interacting with members. The problem started during Rebecca's second week of training. She was shadowing different employees to see how they handled various situations. Rebecca noticed that different tellers had slightly different approaches to customer service, and she started suggesting ways to standardize procedures to improve efficiency. One teller, Maria, 52F, had been working at the credit union for 15 years. She had her own way of organizing her workspace and explaining products to members. Rebecca suggested that Maria should adopt the filing system that another teller used because it looked more organized and professional. Maria thanked Rebecca for her input but said she was comfortable with her current system. Rebecca persisted and explained how Maria's approach could confuse members who were used to different explanations from other tellers. She said consistency was important for customer satisfaction and business growth. Maria mentioned this conversation to Sandra, who told Rebecca that experienced employees had developed their own effective methods and that she should focus on learning rather than critiquing. Sandra said Rebecca would have plenty of opportunities to develop her own style once she completed training. Rebecca agreed to focus on learning, but she continued making observations about ways the branch could improve its operations. She suggested changes to the lobby layout, modifications to the phone greeting script, and adjustments to the appointment scheduling system. Sandra had another conversation with Rebecca about the difference between learning and consulting. She explained that Rebecca's job was to provide member services, not to redesign branch operations. She said Rebecca should concentrate on mastering her basic duties before worrying about broader business improvements. Rebecca finished her training and started working independently. For the first few days, she handled transactions normally and didn't cause any problems. Sandra thought the previous conversations had resolved the issue. But Rebecca was just getting comfortable with the environment. Once she felt confident with the basic procedures, she started implementing her ideas for improvements. She began greeting members with a more elaborate welcome speech that included information about services they might not know about. She thought this would increase product sales and demonstrate superior customer service. The longer greeting slowed down transaction times and created longer lines. Some members seemed annoyed by the extra information when they just wanted to make quick deposits or withdrawals. Sandra noticed the delays and asked Rebecca to use the standard greeting to keep lines moving efficiently. Rebecca argued that her approach was more professional and that members appreciated learning about available services. She said Sandra was prioritizing speed over quality, which would hurt the credit union's reputation in the long run. Sandra explained that member satisfaction surveys consistently showed that people valued quick, efficient service over lengthy product presentations. She told Rebecca to use the standard greeting and focus on completing transactions accurately and promptly. Rebecca complied for a few days, then started a new initiative. She began following up with members after their transactions to ask about their satisfaction with the service they'd received. She created informal surveys asking about wait times, employee helpfulness, and suggestions for improvements. Members were confused by this because the credit union already had formal feedback systems in place. Some people felt pressured to provide compliments or criticism when they just wanted to complete their banking and leave. Several members asked Sandra why they were being surveyed after routine transactions. Sandra told Rebecca to stop conducting member surveys immediately. She explained that customer feedback was collected through official channels and that informal questioning could make members uncomfortable or create liability issues for the credit union. Rebecca was frustrated because she felt like Sandra was preventing her from using her business training to benefit the organization. She said Sandra's resistance to improvement initiatives showed poor leadership and a lack of vision for growing the business. This attitude started affecting Rebecca's interactions with coworkers. She began offering unsolicited advice to other tellers about their customer service techniques and workspace organization. She suggested that Maria should smile more during transactions and that another teller, James, 28M, should explain procedures more thoroughly to elderly members. The other employees were annoyed by Rebecca's constant suggestions and corrections. Maria complained to Sandra that Rebecca was acting like a supervisor instead of a new employee. James said Rebecca made him uncomfortable by critiquing his interactions with members. Sandra called Rebecca into her office for a performance review. She explained that Rebecca's job duties did not include training or supervising other employees. She said Rebecca needed to focus on her own responsibilities and stop offering advice to coworkers unless they specifically asked for help. Rebecca said she was trying to help the team improve and that good employees should always look for ways to contribute beyond their basic job requirements. She argued that Sandra should encourage initiative and teamwork rather than discouraging employee collaboration. Sandra told Rebecca that collaboration meant working together on assigned projects, not critiquing coworkers' performance or redesigning established procedures. She said Rebecca's behavior was creating tension in the workplace and interfering with normal operations. Rebecca apologized and promised to be more mindful of boundaries, but she didn't really understand what she was doing wrong. She came home complaining that Sandra was a micromanager who felt threatened by employees with business education and fresh perspectives. The situation came to a head during Rebecca's 6th week on the job. The credit union was preparing for a regulatory audit, and Sandra needed everyone to follow procedures exactly as written in the policy manual. She held a staff meeting explaining that any deviations from standard procedures could result in compliance violations and regulatory penalties. Rebecca saw the audit as an opportunity to showcase the improvements she'd been suggesting. She prepared a detailed report outlining inefficiencies she'd observed and recommendations for updating policies to improve member satisfaction and operational effectiveness. During her lunch break, Rebecca typed up a report and left it on Sandra's desk. The report was 3 pages long and covered everything from lobby design to staff training protocols. Rebecca included specific suggestions for policy changes that she believed would impress the auditors and demonstrate the branch's commitment to excellence. When Sandra found the report, she was furious. The audit was focused on compliance with existing regulations, not on implementing new procedures. Rebecca's suggestions would require corporate approval, regulatory review, and extensive staff retraining. Implementing any of these changes during an audit period would create massive compliance problems. Sandra called Rebecca into her office immediately. She asked Rebecca why she'd prepared a policy change proposal when the entire staff had been told to follow existing procedures exactly. She explained that Rebecca's report could jeopardize the audit if regulators thought the branch was considering unauthorized modifications to approved policies. Rebecca said she was trying to help the credit union present its best face to auditors by demonstrating innovation and continuous improvement. She argued that her suggestions showed management's commitment to excellence and member service. Sandra explained that regulatory audits were about demonstrating compliance with existing rules, not about showcasing new ideas. She said Rebecca's report showed a fundamental misunderstanding of the audit process and could have created serious problems if she'd shared it with the auditors. Rebecca insisted that her business education had taught her that successful organizations always look for ways to improve and that standing still meant falling behind the competition. She said Sandra's conservative approach would limit the credit union's growth potential. Sandra told Rebecca that she was being terminated effective immediately. She said Rebecca had consistently failed to understand her role and had repeatedly created problems by trying to redesign systems and procedures that were working effectively. Rebecca asked for specific examples of poor performance. Sandra listed the extended greeting script, the unauthorized member surveys, the constant advice to coworkers, and the policy change report. She said Rebecca had been told multiple times to focus on her basic job duties but had continued trying to act like a consultant or manager. Rebecca argued that everything she'd done was intended to help the credit union succeed and that she was being punished for showing initiative and caring about the organization's future. Sandra said initiative was valuable when it was channeled appropriately, but that Rebecca had consistently ignored boundaries and authority structures. Rebecca packed her personal items and left the building. She came home that afternoon and told our parents that Sandra had fired her for being too educated and threatening the status quo. She said Sandra was incompetent and afraid that Rebecca would expose problems with the branch's operations. This is where things got really bad in our family. Dad had been getting frustrated with Rebecca's unemployment situation, and he lost his temper when she came home fired from another job. He started yelling at Rebecca about her attitude and her constant excuses for getting fired. Dad said Rebecca needed to accept that she wasn't management material and that she should focus on keeping a regular job instead of trying to redesign every workplace she entered. He said Rebecca was acting entitled and that her behavior was embarrassing the whole family. Rebecca yelled back that Dad didn't understand modern business practices and that his generation was too rigid to appreciate innovative thinking. She said Dad was taking sides with incompetent managers instead of supporting his own daughter. Mom tried to mediate, but both Dad and Rebecca were too angry to listen. Dad said he was tired of supporting Rebecca financially while she sabotaged every opportunity she got. Rebecca said Dad was being cruel and unsupportive when she needed her family's help. The argument ended with Rebecca storming out of the house. She went to stay with our cousin Lisa, 26F, for a few days while things cooled down at home. But when Rebecca came back, the tension was still there. Dad had spent those few days thinking about the situation, and he decided that Rebecca needed to face real consequences for her behavior. He told Rebecca she had 30 days to find a job and start contributing to household expenses, or she would need to find somewhere else to live. Rebecca was shocked because our parents had never given her ultimatums before. She said Dad was being unfair and that she couldn't control how employers treated her. She argued that she needed family support during difficult times, not additional pressure and threats. Mom was caught in the middle and didn't want to choose sides between her husband and daughter. She suggested that maybe Rebecca could try applying for different types of jobs or consider taking a skills assessment to identify better career matches. Rebecca said the problem wasn't with her skills or career choices but with employers who didn't appreciate qualified employees. She insisted that she just needed to find the right company that would value her education and abilities. Dad said Rebecca had been looking for the right company for 5 years and had been fired from every job she'd gotten. He said the common factor in all these situations was Rebecca's attitude, and that she needed to change her behavior instead of blaming everyone else. Rebecca accused Dad of betraying her and said she couldn't believe her own father was attacking her when she was already struggling with employment discrimination and workplace harassment. She said Dad's ultimatum proved that he didn't love her or want her to succeed. The fight escalated until Rebecca packed a bag and left again. This time she went to stay with our Aunt Carol, 48F, Mom's sister. Carol lives about an hour away and doesn't know much about Rebecca's job situation. That was 2 weeks ago. Rebecca is still staying with Carol, and she's been telling Carol her version of recent events. Carol called Mom to say she was worried about how Dad was treating Rebecca and that maybe Rebecca should stay with her until she gets back on her feet. Mom is stressed about the family conflict and feels guilty about Dad's ultimatum. Dad is frustrated that Carol is enabling Rebecca's behavior and that no one in the family seems willing to hold Rebecca accountable for her actions. I'm caught in the middle of all this drama. Rebecca has been texting me asking for support and saying she can't believe our family is abandoning her. Dad has been asking me to talk to Rebecca about her attitude and help her understand why she keeps getting fired. But I don't think Rebecca will listen to me any more than she's listened to anyone else. She's convinced that she's the victim in all these situations, and she has family members who are willing to support her version of events. The worst part is that Rebecca is now applying for jobs while staying with Carol, and she's going to do the exact same thing at the next workplace. She hasn't learned anything from her recent experiences, and she's more convinced than ever that her problems are caused by other people's incompetence and jealousy. I'm watching my sister destroy her career and tear our family apart, and I don't know how to stop it. Update 3. This is probably going to be my last update about Rebecca because I've reached the point where I can't help her anymore and I need to protect my own peace of mind. Rebecca has been staying with our Aunt Carol for about 6 weeks now. During that time, she's had 2 more job interviews and 1 short-term employment disaster that was somehow worse than all her previous experiences. The first interview was for an administrative assistant position at a small marketing company. Rebecca came back to town for the interview and stayed overnight at our house. She was excited because she said marketing was a creative industry that would appreciate innovative thinking and fresh perspectives. During dinner, Rebecca explained her strategy for the interview. She had prepared a presentation about social media trends and digital marketing opportunities that she planned to share with the hiring manager. She said most administrative assistants probably wouldn't think to offer strategic insights, so this would set her apart from other candidates. I tried to suggest that maybe she should focus on demonstrating her administrative skills rather than giving marketing advice, but Rebecca said I didn't understand how competitive the job market was. She said employers wanted to see initiative and business knowledge, not just basic clerical abilities. The interview didn't go well. Rebecca came home saying the hiring manager seemed confused by her presentation and asked mostly basic questions about scheduling, filing, and phone systems. She said the company was probably too small scale to appreciate sophisticated marketing strategies. She didn't get the job. When she called to ask for feedback, they told her they were looking for someone who wanted to focus on administrative support rather than business development. Rebecca told our parents this proved the company wasn't growth-oriented and probably wouldn't succeed in today's competitive market. The second interview was for a customer service representative position at a local utility company. This was a phone-based job handling billing questions and service requests from customers. Rebecca thought this would be perfect because she said utilities were stable businesses that needed customer service improvements. Rebecca prepared for this interview by researching customer service best practices and developing ideas for improving call center efficiency. She created a list of suggestions for reducing wait times, improving first call resolution rates, and increasing customer satisfaction scores. The interview lasted about 30 minutes, and Rebecca thought it went very well. She said the supervisor seemed interested in her ideas for customer service improvements and asked several questions about her approach to handling difficult customers. Rebecca got this job and was scheduled to start the following Monday. She would go through 1 week of training on company systems and procedures, then begin taking customer calls with supervision and support. Our parents were relieved that Rebecca was working again. Dad had softened his position somewhat after Carol called him to express concerns about his ultimatum. He agreed to let Rebecca move back home once she started the new job, as long as she contributed to household expenses and followed house rules. Rebecca's training week went normally. She learned the computer systems, memorized billing procedures, and practiced handling different types of customer inquiries. The training supervisor said Rebecca was grasping the technical aspects quickly and seemed comfortable with phone communication. The problem started during Rebecca's second week when she began taking live customer calls with minimal supervision. Rebecca decided that the standard call scripts were too impersonal and started modifying them to provide more comprehensive service. Instead of following the procedure for billing inquiries, Rebecca would research customers' entire account histories and offer suggestions for reducing their utility costs. She thought this demonstrated superior customer service and would improve the company's reputation. These extended calls created longer wait times for other customers and exceeded the target call duration metrics that the department used for performance evaluation. Rebecca's supervisor, Tom, 41M, noticed that Rebecca's average call time was nearly double the department standard. Tom discussed call efficiency with Rebecca and explained that while thorough service was important, she needed to balance completeness with productivity. He said customers appreciated quick resolution of their specific questions rather than comprehensive account reviews they hadn't requested. Rebecca argued that her approach provided better value to customers and that the company should prioritize service quality over call volume. She said Tom's focus on speed over thoroughness would hurt customer satisfaction in the long run. Tom explained that the department had researched optimal call handling procedures and that the current scripts and time targets were based on customer feedback and industry best practices. He told Rebecca to follow the established procedures while she learned the job. Rebecca agreed to follow the guidelines, but she continued providing extensive service that exceeded what customers had requested. She would research billing histories, explain rate structures, and offer energy conservation advice even when customers called with simple questions about payment due dates. Customer feedback was mixed. Some people appreciated the additional information, but others were frustrated by long call times when they needed quick answers. Several customers complained that representatives were providing too much information and making simple transactions unnecessarily complicated. Tom had another conversation with Rebecca about call handling procedures. He explained that customer service meant giving people what they needed efficiently, not overwhelming them with unrequested information. He said Rebecca needed to listen to what customers were asking for and provide focused responses. Rebecca said she was trying to educate customers about services and opportunities they might not know about. She argued that proactive customer service was superior to reactive problem solving and that the company should encourage representatives to go above and beyond basic requirements. Tom told Rebecca that going above and beyond meant providing excellent service within established parameters, not ignoring procedures to implement personal customer service philosophies. He said Rebecca needed to follow the call scripts and time guidelines or she would need additional training and supervision. The situation escalated during Rebecca's third week when she started offering billing advice that contradicted company policies. A customer called to ask about setting up automatic payments, and Rebecca spent 20 minutes explaining why automatic payments were disadvantageous and suggesting alternative payment methods. The customer was confused because she had specifically wanted to enroll in automatic payments to simplify her monthly routine. Rebecca insisted that automatic payments reduced customer awareness of usage patterns and that manual payment methods provided better financial control. The customer asked to speak with a supervisor because she felt like Rebecca was arguing with her instead of helping her enroll in the service she had requested. Tom took the call and quickly set up the automatic payment system the customer wanted. Tom called Rebecca into his office and asked why she had discouraged a customer from using a company service. Rebecca explained that she was providing honest financial advice and helping the customer make informed decisions rather than just processing requests blindly. Tom said Rebecca's job was to help customers access the services they requested, not to counsel them about financial management or question their choices. He explained that refusing to process legitimate service requests could create customer complaints and regulatory problems for the company. Rebecca argued that good customer service meant looking out for customers' best interests even when they didn't understand the implications of their decisions. She said Tom was prioritizing company profits over customer welfare. Tom explained that customers had the right to make their own financial decisions and that utility representatives were not qualified or authorized to provide personal financial advice. He said Rebecca needed to process customer requests according to company procedures and stop offering unsolicited counsel. Rebecca was frustrated and came home complaining that Tom was forcing her to provide inferior customer service and that the company cared more about processing transactions than helping customers. She said Tom's approach was unethical and that she was being pressured to compromise her professional standards. Our parents listened to Rebecca's complaints and were sympathetic about her workplace difficulties. Mom said it sounded like another situation where Rebecca's education and professional standards were causing conflicts with less qualified supervisors. But I was starting to see the pattern more clearly. Rebecca wasn't providing better customer service, she was imposing her personal opinions on people who had called for specific help. She was acting like a financial advisor instead of a customer service representative. The final incident happened during Rebecca's fourth week. A customer called to report a billing error and ask for an account credit. Rebecca researched the account and determined that the billing was actually correct according to the customer's usage patterns and rate structure. Instead of explaining the billing calculation and resolving the customer's confusion, Rebecca spent 30 minutes lecturing the customer about energy conservation and suggesting ways to reduce future bills. She implied that the customer's usage was wasteful and that the high bill was a natural consequence of poor energy management. The customer became angry and demanded to speak with a supervisor. She said Rebecca had been condescending and unhelpful, and that she felt attacked for asking a simple billing question. She threatened to file a complaint with the State Public Utilities Commission. Tom took the call and had to spend another 20 minutes apologizing to the customer and explaining the billing calculation in a respectful manner. The customer was satisfied with Tom's explanation but remained upset about her interaction with Rebecca. Tom called Rebecca into his office immediately. He said her interaction with the customer had been completely inappropriate and could have resulted in a regulatory complaint that would require investigation and documentation. Rebecca said she had provided accurate information about energy usage and billing calculations. She argued that customers needed to understand their consumption patterns and that educating them about conservation was part of providing good service. Tom explained that Rebecca had been condescending and judgmental toward a customer who had asked a legitimate question. He said customer service representatives needed to be helpful and respectful regardless of their personal opinions about customers' energy usage or spending habits. Rebecca insisted that she had been helpful by providing information the customer needed to manage her energy costs more effectively. She said Tom was criticizing her for being thorough and educational rather than just transactional. Tom told Rebecca that she was being terminated immediately. He said her approach to customer service was creating complaints and potential regulatory problems, and that she had consistently refused to follow procedures and accept guidance. Rebecca asked for specific examples of poor performance. Tom listed the extended call times, the refusal to process automatic payment enrollment, and the condescending interaction with the billing inquiry customer. He said Rebecca had been counseled multiple times about these issues but had continued the same behavior. Rebecca argued that she was being fired for providing superior customer service and that Tom was threatened by her business education and professional standards. She said the company was prioritizing quantity over quality and that her termination proved they didn't value customer satisfaction. Rebecca cleared out her desk and left the building. She drove straight to Carol's house without coming home first. She called our parents that evening and told them she had been fired by another incompetent supervisor who felt threatened by her customer service expertise. This time, Dad's reaction was different. Instead of getting angry, he just sounded tired and disappointed. He asked Rebecca how many jobs she thought she could lose before she considered that maybe she was doing something wrong. Rebecca said Dad was being unsupportive and that she needed encouragement, not criticism. She said successful people always face resistance from mediocre managers and that persistence was the key to finding the right opportunity. Dad said he loved Rebecca but that he couldn't keep watching her destroy every opportunity she got. He told her she was welcome to come home for family visits, but that she couldn't live in our house unless she was willing to acknowledge her problems and work on changing her behavior. Rebecca hung up on Dad and hasn't spoken to our parents since then. That was 3 weeks ago. Carol has been calling Mom to update her on Rebecca's situation and to express concern about our family's lack of support. According to Carol, Rebecca has been applying for jobs and interviewing regularly. She's targeting customer service manager and training coordinator positions because she says her recent experience has given her insights into customer service problems that companies need to address. Carol thinks Rebecca is being discriminated against because of her age and education level. She believes Rebecca's ideas are too advanced for small-town employers who prefer inexperienced workers they can control easily. Mom is conflicted because she wants to support Rebecca but also understands Dad's frustration. She's been talking to me about the situation and asking whether I think they're being too harsh or too lenient. I've tried to explain to Mom that Rebecca's problem isn't bad luck or discrimination, it's her inability to understand what employers are paying her to do. Rebecca thinks every job is an opportunity to redesign the business, but employers want people who can follow instructions and work within existing systems. But I don't think Mom really understands what I'm trying to tell her. She sees Rebecca as an ambitious daughter who's struggling in a difficult job market, not as someone who's sabotaging her own career through her attitude and behavior. I've decided I can't keep getting involved in this family drama. Rebecca has been texting me asking for support and money, but I've stopped responding to her messages. I can't help someone who refuses to acknowledge that they have a problem. Dad has reached the same conclusion. He told me last week that he's done trying to help Rebecca until she's ready to admit that her approach to work isn't working. He said enabling her behavior by providing financial support and making excuses wasn't helping her learn or grow. Rebecca is now 28 years old and has been fired from more jobs than most people have in their entire careers. She's living with relatives who don't know the full extent of her employment problems, and she's planning to continue the same behavior that's caused all her previous failures. I don't know what it's going to take for Rebecca to realize that she's the problem. Maybe she needs to become truly desperate before she'll consider changing her approach. Maybe she'll never figure it out and will spend her whole life blaming other people for her failures. What I do know is that I can't fix this situation for her. Rebecca has to want to change, and right now she's convinced that everyone else is wrong and she's right. Until that changes, she's going to keep repeating the same cycle of getting hired, causing problems, and getting fired. I feel bad for Rebecca because I think she genuinely wants to succeed and contribute. But wanting to help and actually being helpful are two different things. Rebecca has never learned the difference between being an employee and being a consultant, and she's not willing to accept that distinction. Our family is probably going to be divided about this situation for a long time. Some relatives will continue enabling Rebecca's behavior because they don't want to seem unsupportive. Others will get frustrated and stop helping when they realize that Rebecca isn't going to change. I've chosen to step back and focus on my own life. I can't save Rebecca from herself, and I can't fix the problems she's created in our family. All I can do is hope that someday she'll figure out how to be the employee that employers actually want to hire. But I'm not optimistic about that happening anytime soon. I fixed a leak at my old house as a favor to my estranged wife while she was out of town, but when I went to throw away the scraps I found a box of condoms in the trash can 3 weeks after separating, and she called me dishonorable for finding it while I was still paying her utility bills and mortgage. I have been with my wife, Sandra, 38F, for 11 years. We got married after 4 years of dating, so we have been married for 7 years now. We live in a house we bought together in a quiet part of the city called Hartwell Grove. It is a decent neighborhood, and the house was something we both worked toward. Before I get into why I am posting this, I should give some background on who Sandra is and what our marriage has looked like. Sandra is a motorcycle rider. She has been riding since before we met. When we started dating, I thought it was cool. She knew what she was doing on the road, and she was confident about it. That part was never the issue. The issue was that she developed a habit of going out for rides late at night, sometimes not leaving until 11 p.m. or midnight, and coming back 2 or 3 hours later. She said riding at night was when she felt most free because there was less traffic and fewer distractions. I understood that logic on paper. What I did not understand was why she could not send a quick message when she arrived somewhere or when she was heading back. I am not talking about check-ins every 20 minutes. I mean one text when she got to wherever she was going, and one when she was on her way home. That was it. She knew I did not sleep well when she was out that late, and I explained that to her clearly more than once. She did not see it that way. She said I was treating her like a child, and that she had been riding long before she met me and never needed to report to anyone. I get that argument. But there is a difference between needing to report to someone and choosing to let your partner know you are safe. She never quite accepted that difference. We went to couples counseling once, roughly 3 years into the marriage. The counselor pointed out that Sandra's pattern of going silent during the rides and only texting when she felt like it was creating a pattern of inconsistency, and that it was reasonable for me, Ryan, 40M, to want some basic communication. Sandra sat through that session and afterward agreed to do better. She started checking in more regularly for a few weeks. Then she drifted back to the same behavior. About 8 months ago, there was a specific night that stuck with me. She had gone out around 10:30 p.m. on a Friday, said she was going for a ride and might stop somewhere for a drink. I was fine with that. Around midnight, I sent her a message asking if she was doing okay. No response. I tried calling around 12:30. It went to voicemail. I sent another message at 1 a.m. Nothing. At around 1:15 a.m., I got into my car and drove to the bar she usually went to when she wanted a drink after riding. It is about a 12-minute drive from our house. When I pulled into the parking area nearby, I saw her motorcycle parked outside. I walked past it and put my hand near the exhaust pipe without touching it. It was cold. Not warm, not slightly cool from cooling down, but properly cold, the way metal gets when it has been sitting still for a long time. That bike had been parked there for at least an hour, probably more. I went back home. She came back around 2 a.m. and acted like everything was normal. I told her what I had done and what I found. She said I was overreacting and that she had been there for maybe 45 minutes. We went back and forth. Eventually, after a long conversation that went past 3 a.m., she apologized and said she would be more considerate. I accepted that and we moved on. Then, a few weeks later, something else happened. Sandra had been spending time at a coffee shop she liked, one that also served alcohol. She sometimes worked from there in the afternoons. On this particular day, she had been there for a couple of hours, and she was sending messages regularly enough that I was not concerned. Then she said she was heading to her home office to finish some work. After that, things went quiet. I was out with a couple of friends at a bar that evening. I called her at some point during the evening, partly just to check in. She missed the call. She called back a few minutes later. The moment I picked up, I could hear noise in the background. Not office noise. It was the kind of noise you hear at a packed bar on a weekend night, crowd sounds, music, the kind of ambient sound that does not exist in a home office. I asked her where she was. She said she was in her car. I mentioned the background noise and she said something about the car audio being on. Then, almost immediately, she said she had a call coming in from the real estate agent because we were in the middle of buying a new house, and she had to take it. She hung up. That was plausible enough. We were in contact with the agent regularly at the time. So I let it go. About an hour later, I sent her a message asking how the call with the agent went. She replied that she would call me shortly. When she did call, she was clearly in her car, and she gave me a detailed story about the agent, the lender, some paperwork issue, things that were going on with the house purchase. I asked her if the background noise earlier was really the car audio. She paused for longer than the question warranted and then said yes. That night I could not sleep. The next morning I checked our shared phone plan. It shows call logs for both numbers. I went through her calls from the previous evening. There was no incoming call from the real estate agent. There was no outgoing call to the lender. The calls she described simply had not happened. When I brought this up to her, she admitted she had been with a group of friends and had not mentioned it because she knew I would make it into a bigger deal than it was. She said the reason she lied was because she did not want to deal with my reaction, and that I needed to work on being less controlling. I did not continue that argument. Instead, I moved out of the house. I rented a place about 20 minutes away and told her I needed some space to think. We talked a few more times over the following week. Neither of us was screaming or crying. It was more like two people trying to figure out what they were actually dealing with. By the end of those conversations, we had both said, out loud, that we did not think the marriage was working. No one stormed off. We just sat with it. We agreed to divorce. We talked about staying on decent terms because we do not have children, but we do have shared finances, shared accounts, and a house. Sandra stayed at Hartwell Grove for the time being. I found a place, bought it, and started moving my things out. The reason I am posting this is because of what happened the day I went back to fix a problem at the old house. And I do not know what to do with it. Update 1: When I bought my new place, the first few weeks were quiet. The house was mostly empty. I had some basics, a mattress, a kitchen table, 2 chairs, some boxes I had not unpacked yet. I was not in a rush to settle in. Sandra and I had been civil. We were in the early stages of figuring out the divorce paperwork. No lawyers yet, just conversations about who owned what and how to split it. She was still living at Hartwell Grove until we decided what to do with it, sell or buy each other out. One evening I got a message from her saying there was water dripping from somewhere near the water heater in the garage. She sent a photo. I could see it was a small pinhole leak on one of the pipes connected to the tank. It was not an emergency, but it needed to be fixed before it got worse and damaged the floor or the wall behind it. Sandra said she was going out of town for a few days to visit her sister. She asked if I could come by and take a look while she was gone. I said I would. I drove over on a Thursday afternoon. Being in that house again was strange in a way I am not going to try and describe. I just moved through it practically and focused on the job. The repair itself was not complicated. I had the right tools and picked up the necessary parts from the hardware store on the way over. It took me a little over an hour. When I was done, I gathered the old pipe fittings, the thread tape, and the packaging from the parts I had used, and I went to the garage to throw everything into the trash can. The lid was not on properly, so I lifted it to put it back in place after throwing my stuff in. That is when I saw it. There was an open box of condoms sitting on top of the other trash inside the can. Not sealed. Open. Some of them were gone from the packaging. I stood there for a moment, then I put the lid on the can and walked out of the garage. Sandra and I had been separated for barely 3 weeks at that point. We were still legally married. I had still been covering my share of the utility bills and the mortgage for Hartwell Grove as part of our informal arrangement while we sorted out the paperwork. I drove home. I sent her a message saying the water heater was fixed and that she could stop worrying about it. She called me that evening to say thank you. During that call, I told her that I had found something in the trash and that I knew she had moved on, and that I also knew how she had chosen to do it given the timing. She did not say anything for a couple of seconds. Then she said I had no right to go through her trash. I told her I was throwing away the plumbing scraps and the lid was already off. She did not respond to that. Instead, she said that we had separated and that she did not owe me an explanation for her personal life anymore. Then she said we had an arrangement, meaning that she had assumed once we decided to separate, personal decisions were her own. I told her that I had never agreed to any arrangement, and that we were still married, and that I was still paying bills for that house. She said I was acting without honor because I was making something of what I found in the garbage. She told me I needed to look at my own behavior and my own insecurities that had driven the marriage to this point. I ended the call. The next morning I called my bank, removed myself from the joint savings account, canceled the automatic transfer that was covering part of the Hartwell Grove mortgage, and called the utility companies to take my name off the accounts. All of it done by noon. Update 2: a few things happened between update 1 and now that I want to write down for people who followed the original post. After I removed myself from the accounts, Sandra sent me a long message. The message was not an apology. It was mostly about how my cutting the finances was a form of retaliation and that she was going to bring it up to the divorce attorney she had hired. I did not respond to that message. About a week after that, I got a call from her sister, Nina, 35F. Nina and I had always gotten along fine. She called to tell me that Sandra had told her what happened, specifically about what I had found in the trash and that I had pulled out of the shared accounts. Nina said she was not calling to take sides, and I believed her because she was calm and not aggressive about it. She said she thought both of us were handling a hard situation badly, and she just wanted me to know that Sandra was not doing well. I told Nina I appreciated the call. I told her the account situation was not about punishment, it was about me not continuing to pay for a house I no longer lived in while my name was being used in a divorce filing. Nina said that made sense to her. We ended the call on decent terms. About 2 weeks after that, Sandra's attorney sent a letter about the mortgage. Since both our names are still on the loan, they wanted to discuss whether I would continue contributing until we had a formal agreement in place. I took that letter to an attorney of my own. My attorney looked at the situation and advised me that stopping contributions unilaterally could complicate things in mediation. He suggested a temporary arrangement where I contribute a reduced amount, not the full half, while we sort out the actual split. I agreed to that because it made more legal sense than creating a fight over it. The house purchase I had made for myself went smoothly. I got the keys, the place is in my name only, and I have been living there for about a month now. As for the condom situation, Sandra never brought it up again after that phone call. No explanation, no admission, nothing. I did the math myself. If I moved out 3 weeks before I found that box, and the trash had other things in it suggesting it had been used at least once since I left, then that was a very short window. We are talking about days, maybe a week or two after I moved out, while we were still having conversations about whether the marriage could somehow be saved. I did not bring it up again either. My attorney told me it is not relevant to the divorce proceedings unless I wanted to make it relevant, and that doing so would likely just make things messier and longer. I decided not to. The process is moving forward. Mediation is scheduled for about 6 weeks from now. Update 3: mediation happened last week. I want to give a final update for anyone who has been following this. It took about 4 hours across 2 sessions. Sandra and I were in separate rooms for most of it. The mediator moved between us. The house at Hartwell Grove is going to be listed for sale. We agreed on that. Neither of us wanted to buy the other out, and after all the back and forth, neither of us wanted to keep it. The equity will be split after the sale costs are covered. The joint savings account had already been sorted before mediation started. I had removed myself from it in update 1, but there was a remaining balance that had to be formally divided. That got handled. Sandra had wanted to include a claim about the months I had stopped paying the full mortgage contribution. My attorney had already dealt with that by documenting the reduced contribution arrangement we had agreed to, so it did not become a major issue. Her attorney pushed back on a couple of small things, but nothing significant enough to drag the process out further. By the end of the second session, we had a draft agreement that both of us initialed. The final signed version gets submitted to the court after a review period. One thing I did not mention in the earlier updates was that around the same time as the water heater visit, my cat of 12 years was diagnosed with cancer. He passed away the same week I found the condom box. I took him to the vet, they gave me the options, and I made the call to let him go. He had been with me since before Sandra and I even started dating. I drove home from the vet and sat in my empty kitchen for a while. I am not going to make a bigger deal of that than it is. It happened. It was a rough week. The divorce will be finalized in about 2 months based on the court calendar. My house is mine. My accounts are mine. The motorcycle, which was always hers, stays with her. That is where things stand. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. We lost our son and got back together on his birthday, but my ex was double dipping with our neighbor while acting confused about his feelings for me, so I said goodbye to his drama and found real love with someone honest. Lisa, 34F, and my ex-husband Andrew, 36M, have been divorced for 8 years. We got married when I was 20 and he was 22 because I got pregnant with our son Jamie during our sophomore year of college. Both our families pushed us hard to get married before the baby came. We tried to make it work for Jamie's sake, but we were just kids ourselves trying to figure out how to be parents and spouses at the same time. When Jamie was 2 years old, we both realized we were making each other miserable. We fought constantly about money, responsibilities, and pretty much everything else. We decided to divorce but promised each other we would put Jamie first no matter what. The divorce was actually the best thing that happened to our family. We became much better parents when we weren't trying to be married to each other. For the next 6 years, we had the kind of co-parenting relationship that other divorced couples envied. We lived in the same neighborhood so Jamie could bike between our houses. We attended every school event together, coordinated birthday parties, and even spent some holidays together for Jamie's sake. Andrew would come over to help me fix things around my house, and I would help him with his laundry when he was swamped with work deadlines. We became genuine friends. Jamie was diagnosed with leukemia when he was 7. The next year was a blur of hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and sleepless nights. Andrew and I took turns staying with Jamie during his treatments. We held each other up through the worst moments. When the doctors told us there was nothing more they could do, we brought Jamie home and took care of him together during his final weeks. Jamie died 3 years ago when he was 8. Andrew completely shut down after the funeral. He stopped returning my calls and texts. When I went to his apartment to check on him, he barely opened the door. He looked like he hadn't showered or eaten in days. His place was a disaster with takeout containers everywhere and dirty clothes piled up. I started bringing him groceries and doing his laundry. He never asked me to, but he never told me to stop either. Slowly, he started talking to me again. We began meeting for coffee once a week, then twice a week. We never talked about Jamie during those first few months. We just sat together and sometimes one of us would cry without saying anything. About 2 years ago, we started acknowledging Jamie's birthday and the anniversary of his death. Last year, we visited his grave together and went to dinner afterward. It became our way of honoring his memory without falling apart completely. This year, Jamie would have turned 11. Andrew suggested we do something Jamie would have liked instead of just being sad all day. Jamie loved pizza and arcade games, so we went to Chuck E. Cheese in the afternoon. It felt strange being there without any kids, but we played skee ball and ate terrible pizza just like Jamie would have wanted. After Chuck E. Cheese, Andrew invited me back to his place. He had bought a small cake and we lit 11 candles for Jamie. We sat in his living room eating cake and looking through old photos on his phone. Andrew had videos I had never seen of Jamie playing with his toy trucks and singing songs he made up. We opened a bottle of wine and kept looking at pictures. Andrew showed me videos of Jamie practicing for his school talent show. In one video, Jamie was trying to juggle and kept dropping the balls while laughing hysterically. We both started laughing and crying at the same time. The wine made everything feel less heavy. We moved to his couch and kept talking about funny things Jamie used to do. Andrew remembered how Jamie insisted on wearing his Superman cape to the grocery store every week. I told him about the time Jamie tried to give his vegetables to the dog under the table and got caught with green beans falling out of his pockets. At some point, we ended up sitting very close to each other on the couch. I don't remember who moved first, but we started kissing. It wasn't like when we were married. Back then, everything felt rushed and stressful. This was slow and careful, like we were both afraid to break something fragile. We ended up in his bedroom. I won't go into details, but it was completely different from when we were together years ago. We were different people now. We fell asleep holding each other, and I woke up around 6 in the morning. Andrew was already awake but he wasn't looking at me. I got dressed quietly and he walked me to the door. I thanked him for the day and he nodded. Neither of us mentioned what happened. I drove home and have been replaying everything in my head for the past 3 days. I haven't heard from Andrew since I left his apartment. Usually, he texts me within a day or two after we spend time together, even if it's just to share a meme or ask about work. But there's been complete silence. I've picked up my phone to text him probably 50 times, but I have no idea what to say. I keep wondering if we both just needed comfort on a hard day and used each other to feel less alone. Or if there were actual feelings involved that we've been ignoring for years. I can't tell the difference anymore. Part of me wants to pretend it never happened and go back to our normal friendship. But another part of me can't stop thinking about how right it felt to be close to someone who understood exactly what I was going through. I'm scared to bring it up because I don't want to lose the only person who really gets what it's like to lose Jamie. But I'm also scared not to bring it up because this silence is killing me. I have no idea what Andrew is thinking or if he regrets what happened. I know this situation is complicated and probably sounds crazy to people who haven't been through something like this. But Andrew and I have been through things together that most people can't imagine. We've seen each other at our absolute worst and somehow managed to stay friends through all of it. I need advice on what to do next. Should I reach out to him and acknowledge what happened? Should I wait for him to contact me first? Should I pretend it never happened and try to go back to normal? I'm completely lost and don't want to make this worse than it already is. Update 1. Thank you to everyone who commented on my last post. Reading your responses helped me realize I needed to stop overthinking everything and just talk to Andrew. The silence between us was getting ridiculous and I missed talking to him. I texted him last Tuesday asking if he wanted to meet for coffee like we used to do. He replied within an hour saying yes and suggesting we meet at the diner where we always went. When I got there, he was already sitting in our usual booth looking nervous. We ordered coffee and sat there awkwardly for a few minutes before I finally brought up what happened. I told him I had been thinking about Jamie's birthday and wasn't sure how to process everything. Andrew said he had been thinking about it too and felt confused about what it meant. We both admitted we missed talking to each other and didn't want things to stay weird between us. Andrew said he didn't regret what happened but wasn't sure if it was just grief or something more. I told him I felt the same way. We talked for over 2 hours about everything we had been thinking for the past 2 weeks. It was the most honest conversation we had ever had, even more than when we decided to get divorced. By the end of our talk, we decided we wanted to see if there was something real between us or if it was just the emotion of the day. Andrew suggested we try going on an actual date, something we had never really done even when we were married. We agreed to take things slowly and see what developed. Our first date was dinner at a restaurant we had never been to together. It felt strange at first because we were trying to be romantic instead of just friends. But after a while, we relaxed and had a good time. Andrew told me stories about his job that he had never shared before, and I realized how much I didn't know about his daily life. We've been on 4 dates over the past 2 weeks. We went to a movie, took a walk around the lake, and had lunch at a place downtown. Last weekend, Andrew came over to my house and we cooked dinner together. It was the first time he had been in my kitchen since before Jamie died. After dinner, we were washing dishes and he kissed me again. This time it didn't feel like we were both grieving and looking for comfort. It felt like two people who actually liked each other. We spent the evening on my couch watching Netflix and talking about random things. I'm not going to lie, this whole situation still feels weird sometimes. Andrew and I have so much history together, both good and terrible. We know each other's worst habits and biggest fears. But we also know each other's strengths and have been through things that would break most people. The strangest part is that I'm starting to see him differently than I did when we were married. Back then, we were both stressed and immature and had no idea what we were doing. Now he's more patient and thoughtful than he used to be. He listens better and doesn't get defensive when we disagree about things. We haven't told anyone about this yet. My sister would probably think I've lost my mind, and Andrew's brother has never been supportive of anything Andrew does anyway. We decided to keep this between us until we figure out where it's going. But here's where things got complicated. Last Friday, I was at the grocery store and ran into my neighbor Carol, 50 SF, who lives across the street from Andrew. She made a comment about seeing my car at his place several nights recently and asked if everything was okay. I told her we were just spending more time together as friends, but she gave me a look that made it clear she suspected something more was happening. Carol has always been a gossip, but she was also close to Jamie and has been kind to both Andrew and me since he died. She brings us casseroles sometimes and always asks how we're doing. But I could tell from her expression that she was surprised to see us together so much. Then yesterday, Andrew called me sounding upset. Apparently Carol had called him and asked directly if we were dating. She told him she was concerned about us moving too fast after everything we had been through. Andrew said he was polite but told her it wasn't her business. But after the call, he started questioning whether we were making a mistake. When we met for coffee yesterday afternoon, Andrew seemed different. He kept saying maybe we were confusing grief with romantic feelings and should slow down even more. He suggested we take a break from dating and go back to just being friends for a while. I was surprised by how much his suggestion bothered me. Over the past 2 weeks, I had started looking forward to our dates and thinking about him in ways I hadn't in years. The idea of going backward felt like giving up on something that might actually work. We ended up having our first real disagreement since we started dating. I told Andrew I thought he was letting Carol's opinion influence him too much. He said he was just trying to be careful and didn't want us to ruin our friendship by rushing into something we weren't ready for. We left the coffee shop without resolving anything. Andrew said he needed some time to think, and I said I did too. That was 2 days ago and we haven't talked since. I'm back to staring at my phone and wondering what he's thinking. I'm frustrated because things were going well between us until someone else stuck their nose in our business. But I'm also wondering if Andrew was looking for an excuse to pull back because he's getting scared. This whole situation is more complicated than I thought it would be. Update: 2 things between Andrew and me have gotten much more complicated since my last update. The break he wanted turned into 3 weeks of barely talking to each other. We exchanged a few texts about practical things, but the easy communication we used to have was gone. I was getting tired of the back and forth, so I decided to be direct. I went to his apartment last Saturday and told him I thought we were both overthinking everything. I said I missed him and wanted to try dating again without worrying about what other people thought. Andrew let me in and we sat at his kitchen table talking for hours. He admitted he had been scared about changing our relationship and losing me completely if things didn't work out. I told him I had the same fears but thought what we had was worth the risk. We decided to give dating another try, but with better boundaries. We agreed not to discuss our relationship with neighbors or family members until we knew where things were heading. We also decided to be more intentional about spending time together instead of just falling into old patterns. The first week back together went well. We had dinner at my place on Tuesday and went to a concert on Friday night. Andrew seemed more relaxed and stopped second-guessing every decision we made. I started thinking maybe we had worked through our issues and could move forward. But then I found out something that changed everything. Last Wednesday, I was at the bank and ran into Sarah, 29F, who used to be Jamie's babysitter when he was younger. Sarah had always been good with Jamie and we stayed in touch occasionally after he got sick. Sarah asked how Andrew and I were doing and mentioned she had heard we were dating. I was surprised because we hadn't told anyone except that we had decided to keep things private. When I asked where she heard that, Sarah said Carol had told several people in the neighborhood that Andrew and I were together. I was annoyed that Carol was spreading gossip about us, but then Sarah said something that really bothered me. She told me that Carol had also mentioned Andrew had been asking her out for coffee recently. According to Sarah, Carol said Andrew seemed lonely and was looking for companionship. At first, I thought Sarah must have misunderstood something. But then she described specific details about conversations Carol claimed to have had with Andrew. Sarah said Carol told her that Andrew had complimented her cooking and asked if she would like to have dinner with him sometime. I spent the rest of the day trying to convince myself that Sarah had gotten the story wrong. But the more I thought about it, the more things started making sense. Andrew had been hesitant about dating me and kept suggesting we slow down. Maybe he was interested in someone else and didn't know how to tell me. I decided to ask Andrew directly instead of assuming the worst. When he came over for dinner on Thursday, I brought up my conversation with Sarah. I asked if he had been talking to Carol about anything other than our relationship. Andrew got defensive immediately. He said Carol had brought him a casserole a few weeks ago and they talked for a few minutes on his porch. He claimed it was just neighborly conversation and he hadn't asked her out for anything. But when I pressed him for details, his story didn't match what Sarah had told me. Andrew said Carol had only visited once, but Sarah mentioned multiple conversations. Andrew also couldn't explain why Carol would tell people he was interested in her if he had only been polite. We ended up arguing about it for over an hour. Andrew kept insisting nothing inappropriate had happened with Carol, but he couldn't give me a straight answer about exactly what they had discussed. I told him I felt like he was hiding something from me and that made me question everything else about our relationship. The argument ended with Andrew leaving my house angry. He said he was tired of having to defend himself and prove his intentions to me. I said I was tired of feeling like I was the only one really invested in making our relationship work. We didn't talk for a week after that fight. I kept replaying our conversation and trying to figure out if I had overreacted. But I also kept thinking about how defensive Andrew had gotten when I asked simple questions about Carol. Finally, I decided to get the truth from Carol herself. I went to her house last Saturday morning and asked her directly about her interactions with Andrew. Carol seemed surprised by my questions at first, but then she started talking. Carol told me that Andrew had indeed visited her several times over the past month. She said he seemed to be struggling with something and would stay on her porch talking for long periods. According to Carol, Andrew had asked her advice about relationships and whether she thought it was possible for divorced couples to get back together successfully. But then Carol said something that really hurt. She told me that Andrew had also asked if she would be interested in going to dinner with him. Carol said she had declined because she knew about our history and didn't want to get involved in a complicated situation. Carol also mentioned that Andrew had seemed uncertain about whether getting back together with me was a good idea. She said he expressed concerns about us having too much painful history and whether we could ever have a normal relationship. I left Carol's house feeling completely betrayed. Andrew had been telling me he wanted to work on our relationship while simultaneously asking another woman out and expressing doubts about me to her. I realized he had probably been looking for a way out of our relationship from the beginning. I sent Andrew a text that afternoon telling him I knew about his conversations with Carol and we needed to talk. He called me within an hour and asked if he could come over. When he arrived, I told him everything Carol had said. Andrew admitted he had talked to Carol more than he had originally told me. He said he had been confused about his feelings and needed someone outside the situation to talk to. He also admitted he had asked Carol to dinner, but claimed it was just as friends and happened before we started dating again. I told Andrew I didn't believe his timeline and thought he had been dishonest with me from the beginning. I said I felt like I was competing with Carol for his attention and that wasn't something I was willing to do. Andrew tried to convince me that Carol didn't mean anything to him and he wanted to focus on our relationship. But I had already made up my mind. I told him I thought we should stop seeing each other romantically and go back to being just friends. Andrew left my house that night looking defeated. We haven't spoken since then except for one text exchange where he apologized and said he understood my decision. I'm disappointed because I really thought we might have something special this time, but I'm also relieved to know the truth. Update 3: I've been thinking about whether to post another update, but some things have happened that I wanted to share. The situation with Andrew has basically ended, but there have been some unexpected developments that I didn't see coming. After my last update, Andrew and I didn't talk for about 6 weeks. I threw myself into work and spent more time with friends I had been neglecting. It was hard at first because Andrew had been such a big part of my routine for years, even before we tried dating again. About 3 weeks ago, I was at Target and saw Carol in the checkout line. She looked uncomfortable when she noticed me, but I decided to approach her anyway. I wanted to clear the air since we live in the same neighborhood and would probably keep running into each other. Carol apologized for getting involved in my relationship with Andrew. She said she never intended to cause problems between us and felt bad about how everything turned out. Then she told me something I wasn't expecting. According to Carol, Andrew had come to her house the day after our final conversation and told her he had messed up badly. He explained that he had asked her to dinner because he was scared about getting back together with me and was looking for a distraction. Carol said Andrew told her he realized he had feelings for me that were deeper than he wanted to admit, and that scared him. Carol also said that Andrew asked her not to tell me about their conversation because he was embarrassed about how he had handled everything. She said he seemed genuinely upset about hurting me and regretted not being honest from the beginning. I was surprised to hear this because Andrew had never been good at admitting when he was wrong, even when we were married. But I also didn't know what to do with the information. Too much had happened for me to just forget about his dishonesty and give him another chance. 2 weeks ago, Andrew finally reached out to me. He sent a long text message apologizing for everything and asking if we could meet for coffee. He said he understood if I didn't want to see him, but he wanted to explain his side of things properly. I agreed to meet him, mostly because I missed having him in my life as a friend. We met at the same diner where we had our first conversation about dating, which felt appropriate somehow. Andrew was more direct than I had ever seen him. He admitted he had been scared about getting serious with me and had talked to Carol because he was looking for reasons not to pursue our relationship. He said asking her to dinner was stupid and dishonest, and he regretted handling everything so poorly. But then Andrew said something that surprised me. He told me that during our weeks apart, he realized he had been sabotaging our relationship because he was afraid of losing me again. He said losing Jamie had been the worst thing that ever happened to him, and the idea of losing me too was terrifying. Andrew said he thought if he kept our relationship casual or found someone else to focus on, he wouldn't risk getting hurt again. But he realized that approach was just hurting both of us and preventing him from being happy. I appreciated his honesty, but I told him I wasn't interested in dating him again. Too much trust had been broken, and I didn't want to spend months wondering if he was being completely truthful with me. I said I was willing to be friends again, but only if he could accept that decision without trying to change my mind. Andrew said he understood and just wanted me back in his life in whatever way I was comfortable with. We talked for another hour about other things, and it felt good to have a normal conversation with him again. Since then, we've been slowly rebuilding our friendship. We've had coffee twice and exchanged texts about random things. It's different than it was before because there's still some awkwardness between us, but it's getting better. The unexpected part of all this is that I've started dating someone new. I met David, 38M, through a coworker about a month ago. He's a teacher and has never been married, which means he doesn't have the complicated history that Andrew and I share. David knows about Jamie and my relationship with Andrew, but he doesn't treat me like I'm fragile or damaged. We've been on several dates and I really like him. He's completely different from Andrew, more straightforward and less complicated. I haven't told Andrew about David yet because I don't think he needs to know right now. We're still working on being friends again, and I don't want to complicate the process. Eventually I'll probably mention it if things get more serious with David, but for now I'm keeping my dating life separate from my friendship with Andrew. Andrew seems to be doing better too. He mentioned he's been spending more time with his brother and has joined a hiking group through work. He looks healthier than he has in a long time and seems less stressed overall. I think this whole experience taught me that some relationships are meant to stay in the past, even when you care about the person deeply. Andrew and I have been through too much together to have a simple romantic relationship. We work better as friends who understand each other's history but don't try to recreate something that didn't work the first time. I'm glad we tried dating because it helped me realize what I actually want in a relationship. I want someone who is direct and honest, even when it's difficult. I want someone who doesn't run away when things get complicated. And I want someone who sees me as more than just a shared trauma or a way to relive the past. Andrew will always be important to me because he's the only other person who loved Jamie the way I did. But that doesn't mean we're meant to be together romantically. Sometimes caring about someone means accepting that you're better apart than together. Girlfriend made me do all her repairs for free while her friends mocked me. Then she called me a pathetic little man who only helps because no one else would want me. So I left her to handle the expensive apartment she couldn't afford without my co-signature and now she's homeless. I, 27M, still can't believe what happened. I work in construction. About 6 months ago, I was selling some old furniture on Facebook Marketplace. A woman named Zoe, 26F, messaged me about a dresser I had listed. We started talking and she mentioned her apartment had terrible lighting and asked if I knew anything about electrical work. I went over to check it out. Her place was a studio apartment with one overhead light that barely worked. The outlets were old and half of them didn't function properly. I spent 3 hours there that first day fixing her electrical issues for free. She made dinner and we talked. She worked at a marketing firm downtown and had just moved to the city 6 months earlier from a small town. Zoe kept texting me after that. She needed help hanging pictures, then her bathroom faucet started leaking, then her door lock was sticking. Each time I came over, we would hang out afterward. She was funny and easy to talk to. After about a month of these repair visits, we started dating officially. Things moved fast. Zoe was always talking about how independent she wanted to be and how she never wanted to rely on anyone. But every week there was something else that needed fixing. Her garbage disposal broke, her window wouldn't close properly, her kitchen cabinet door fell off its hinges. I didn't mind helping because that's what boyfriends do, right? 3 months into dating, Zoe became obsessed with this apartment complex across town. The rent was almost double what she was paying, but it had a gym, a pool, and was in a trendy neighborhood where her coworkers lived. She showed me the floor plans every day and talked about how living there would help her career. The problem was her credit score. She had defaulted on a credit card in college and had student loan payments she sometimes missed. The property management company wanted a cosigner or 6 months rent up front. Zoe didn't have 6 months rent saved up. She asked me to cosign the lease. I told her I would only do it if we moved in together, since my name would be on the paperwork anyway. She agreed immediately. Looking back, she agreed too quickly. The move was scheduled for a Saturday in July. I took the day off work and rented a truck. Zoe invited her 3 friends to help: Kelly, 25F, Megan, 27F, and Lisa, 24F. When I arrived at Zoe's old place at 8 a.m., the friends were already there drinking coffee and taking photos of each other. I loaded the truck by myself while they sat on the couch scrolling through the photos. Zoe kept saying she needed to coordinate everything from inside where it was air conditioned. When I asked for help with her heavy dresser, Kelly said she just got her nails done. Megan said she had a bad back. Lisa didn't give a reason. At the new apartment, I carried everything up to the 3rd floor alone. The friends had gone to get lunch and came back with food only for themselves. Zoe said she wasn't hungry but took half of Kelly's sandwich. I ate a granola bar from my truck. While I was assembling Zoe's bed frame, I could hear them in the living room. Kelly made a comment about how some guys just like to feel needed. They all laughed. Later, while I was fixing a loose towel rack in the bathroom, Megan said loudly that I was good for manual labor at least. More laughing. Zoe never told them to stop. She would just smile and change the subject. The apartment came with central air, but Zoe's bedroom unit wasn't working properly. She called the maintenance office 3 times that first week. They kept saying they would send someone but nobody came. By the following weekend, Zoe was complaining constantly about the heat. She bought a window AC unit and left it in the box in the living room. Saturday morning, she woke me up saying we needed to install it right away because Kelly and Megan were coming over to swim at the pool. I read the installation instructions. The unit needed to be mounted in the window with brackets that required drilling into the window frame. The lease specifically said no drilling or modifications to windows without written permission. I showed Zoe this section of the lease. She said the maintenance people were useless and nobody would know if we were careful. She said I was making it more complicated than it needed to be. Her friends were going to be there in 2 hours and she wanted the bedroom cool. I spent an hour and a half installing the AC unit. The room had 2 floor fans, but Zoe had positioned both of them to blow on her collection of plants instead of toward the bed. The temperature was 89 degrees outside and probably close to that inside. While I was drilling the brackets, sweat was dripping into my eyes. My shirt was soaked. Zoe sat on the bed with her laptop, ordering groceries online. Kelly and Megan arrived halfway through the installation and went straight to the kitchen to make drinks. When I was tightening the final screws, I could hear them talking in the living room. Zoe's voice carried clearly. She said I wasn't installing the AC because I loved her. She said I was doing it because I was scared no one else would ever want me. She called me a pathetic little man. Kelly laughed out loud. Megan made some comment about men with low self-esteem. Lisa, who had just arrived, asked what was so funny and they filled her in. More laughing. I finished the installation and tested the unit. It worked perfectly. Zoe came into the bedroom and turned the temperature down to 65 degrees. She looked at the AC, then at me, and told me to go fix the bathroom shelf that was crooked and not to mess it up like I had messed up our 3-month anniversary dinner. For context, our anniversary dinner had been fine except the restaurant lost our reservation and we had to wait an hour for a table. I had made the reservation 2 weeks in advance and confirmed it that morning. The hostess apologized and comped our appetizers. Zoe spent the entire meal complaining about how I should have had a backup plan. Standing there in her bedroom, listening to her friends still laughing in the next room, something switched off in my head. I let out a laugh. Not a bitter laugh or a sarcastic laugh. A genuine laugh of disbelief. The 3 friends went quiet in the living room. Zoe asked what was funny. I didn't answer. I unplugged my drill, put it back in the case, and grabbed my tool bag. I walked past the 3 friends, who were all staring at me, opened the apartment door, and left. My phone started buzzing before I got to the parking garage. Text after text from Zoe. Just question marks at first, then asking where I was going, then telling me to come back and finish the shelf. I drove home and sat in my kitchen. My phone kept buzzing. Zoe sent me a screenshot of her Instagram story, which was a photo of the AC unit with the caption "When you have to do everything yourself." She deleted it 20 minutes later and posted a different photo of her and her friends by the pool. That night she sent me a long text about how I was being dramatic and childish. She said her friends were just joking around and I needed to learn to take a joke. She said I had embarrassed her by leaving without saying goodbye. I didn't respond to any of her messages. The next morning I called my dad and told him what happened. He listened to the whole story without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a minute. Then he said I shouldn't let people use me and I shouldn't let them think they could get away with it. I started making a list in my head. The lease I co-signed. The internet bill that was in my name. The security deposit I paid. The kitchen table I bought because her old one was broken. The coffee maker, the bathroom mirror, the living room lamp. Zoe's behavior that day wasn't a one-time thing. It was just the most obvious example of how she saw me. I was useful. I was there to solve problems and make her life easier. I wasn't her boyfriend. I was her handyman who she happened to sleep with. I decided I was done being useful. Update 1. The response to my original post was overwhelming. A lot of people shared similar stories and gave me advice. Some people said I was overreacting, but most understood why I left. I wanted to update everyone on what happened next. The morning after I walked out, I woke up to several text messages. Zoe had sent me photos of her Wi-Fi settings with messages saying the internet wasn't working and asking me to call the provider. Megan had texted me asking if I could help remove a couch that weekend. Both messages acted like nothing had happened. I didn't respond to either of them. 2 days later, I ran into Lisa at the grocery store. She approached me while I was picking out produce and said I needed to apologize to Zoe. She said what happened wasn't that serious and I was making Zoe look bad in front of her friends. I looked at Lisa and started laughing the same way I had laughed in Zoe's bedroom. I put my oranges in my cart and walked away while she was still talking. That afternoon I logged into the internet account. The service was in my name and the monthly payment came out of my bank account automatically. I changed the Wi-Fi password and sent Zoe a text message. I told her the internet bill was due in 2 weeks and if she wanted to keep the service, she needed to pay it. If not, I would cancel the account. She called me immediately. I didn't answer. She called 6 more times. I turned my phone off. The next day I called the apartment complex and spoke to the property manager. I explained that I needed to be removed from the lease because Zoe and I were no longer together. The manager said they could remove me, but since I was the primary applicant with better credit, the lease would need to be restructured. He explained that without my income on the application, Zoe would need to qualify on her own. Based on her salary and credit score, she would need a different cosigner or the rent would increase to market rate for a single occupant. Market rate was $400 more per month than what we had been paying. I told him to go ahead and remove me from the lease. He said he would send Zoe the paperwork and she would have 30 days to find a new cosigner or agree to the higher rent. That evening, Zoe showed up at my apartment. She pounded on the door for 5 minutes before I opened it. She pushed past me into my living room and started yelling about the internet and the lease. She said I was trying to ruin her life over a stupid joke. She picked up a picture frame from my coffee table and threw it across the room. The glass shattered against the wall. She grabbed books from my bookshelf and dropped them on the floor. When I told her to leave, she slapped my hand away and said she wasn't going anywhere until I fixed everything. I walked to my front door and held it open. I told her if she didn't leave, I would call the police. She stood there for another minute, then stormed out. She slammed the door so hard that my neighbor came out to check if everything was okay. The next few days were quiet. Then Zoe started a group chat with me, Kelly, Megan, and Lisa. She wrote a long message about how I was financially abusing her by removing my name from the lease and cutting off the internet. She said I was trying to make her homeless because my ego was hurt. I screenshot the lease agreement, which clearly showed both of our names and signatures. I also screenshot my bank statements showing the internet payments, the security deposit, and the first month's rent. I posted all of these in the group chat without any commentary. Kelly left the group chat immediately. Megan didn't respond. Lisa sent one message saying this was between Zoe and me and she didn't want to be involved. An hour later, Zoe sent me a Venmo request for $50. The description said repair costs for damaged shelf. I screenshot the Venmo request and posted it in the group chat with the message invoice for services rendered. Lisa also left the group chat. Megan still didn't say anything, but I could see she was reading the messages. The internet got shut off a week later because Zoe never paid the bill. She sent me angry texts about how I was sabotaging her work from home days. I didn't respond. 3 days after that, the property manager called me. He said Zoe had missed the deadline to find a new co-signer and had refused to sign the new lease at the higher rent. She had been served with a 30-day notice to vacate. I asked if there was anything else I needed to do. He said no, I was completely removed from the lease and had no further responsibility for the apartment. That weekend, I got a text from my friend Jake, 29M, who worked at the same marketing firm as Zoe. He said Zoe had been asking people about me, trying to get them to reach out and convince me to help her with the apartment situation. Jake said she was telling people I was refusing to pay rent and leaving her to handle everything alone. Jake knew the real story because I had told him what happened. He said he set the record straight with a few coworkers, but Zoe was still spreading her version to anyone who would listen. I showed Jake the screenshots of the lease and bank statements. He said I should send them to him so he could share them if anyone else asked about the situation. 2 weeks later, Jake texted me again. He said Zoe had been complaining at work about her living situation and mentioned that her ex-boyfriend was making things difficult. Their mutual supervisor had asked Zoe if she needed any accommodations for her work schedule while she dealt with personal issues. Zoe had apparently told the supervisor that I was harassing her and making it impossible for her to focus at work. The supervisor asked if Zoe needed help filing a police report or if the company should take any action. Jake said he happened to be in the break room when this conversation took place. He showed the supervisor the screenshots I had sent him and explained what really happened. The supervisor told Zoe that based on the documentation, it looked like she was dealing with the natural consequences of a breakup, not harassment. Zoe stopped talking about me at work after that conversation. I haven't heard from her directly in over a week. Megan texted me yesterday asking if I wanted to get coffee and talk about everything. I deleted the message without responding. My dad was right. I shouldn't let people use me, and I shouldn't let them think they can get away with it. Update 2: I didn't expect to post another update, but some things happened that I thought people would want to hear about. First, the apartment situation resolved itself. Zoe moved out at the end of last month. According to Jake, she found a studio apartment closer to downtown that costs about the same as her half of the rent at the old place. She had to give up the pool and the gym, but she's back to living within her means. I thought that would be the end of it, but Zoe wasn't ready to let things go. About 3 weeks ago, I started getting friend requests on Facebook from people I didn't recognize. All of them had mutual friends with Zoe. I didn't accept any of the requests, but I could see some of their profiles had posts about toxic masculinity and men who abandon their responsibilities. Jake told me Zoe was still talking about me at work, but now she was focusing on how I left her to deal with everything alone. She wasn't mentioning the co-signing or the bills anymore. Just that I walked out during a difficult time and didn't help her move. I ignored all of this until Zoe crossed a line that I wasn't expecting. She messaged my sister Emma, 24F, on Instagram. Emma lives in another state and had only met Zoe twice when she visited me. Zoe sent Emma a long message about how worried she was about me. She said I had been acting erratically and she was concerned about my mental health. Zoe told Emma that I had been making threats and she was scared to be alone. She said she thought I needed professional help and maybe Emma could convince me to talk to someone. Emma called me immediately after getting the message. She was confused because nothing Zoe said matched the brother she knew. Emma asked me what was really going on. I told Emma the whole story from the beginning. I sent her the same screenshots I had sent to Jake. Emma was quiet while she looked through everything. Then Emma got mad. Not at me, but at Zoe. Emma said what Zoe had done was manipulative and scary. She said trying to turn family members against each other was crossing a major boundary. Emma screenshot Zoe's message and sent it to me. Then she blocked Zoe on all social media platforms. But Zoe wasn't done with my family. 2 days later, she found my dad on Facebook and sent him a message. She told my dad that I was struggling with anger issues and had damaged her property during our breakup. She said she was worried I might hurt myself or someone else. My dad called me that evening. He wasn't confused like Emma had been. He was angry. He said anyone who would lie to someone's family was showing their true character. He blocked Zoe immediately and didn't even screenshot her message. The family situation made me realize that Zoe wasn't just embarrassed or hurt. She was trying to isolate me and make me look unstable. This felt like more than just post-breakup drama. I decided to document everything in case I needed it later. I saved all of her text messages, took screenshots of the social media posts her friends were making, and wrote down dates and times of every interaction. That turned out to be a good decision. Last week, I got a call from someone who said she was Zoe's sister, Monica, 28F. I had never met Monica, but Zoe had mentioned her a few times. Monica said Zoe had told her I was harassing her and she wanted me to stop contacting her. I told Monica I hadn't contacted Zoe in over 6 weeks. Monica seemed surprised. She said Zoe had been showing her text messages and phone calls that were supposedly from me. I told Monica that if Zoe was receiving harassing messages, they weren't coming from me. I offered to send Monica screenshots of my message history to prove I hadn't been contacting Zoe. Monica said that wasn't necessary, but she asked me to explain my side of what had happened. I gave her the short version of the story. I didn't send any screenshots or try to make Zoe look bad. I just explained that we had broken up and I had removed myself from our shared financial obligations. Monica was quiet for a long time. Then she said Zoe had told her a very different story. She said she needed to talk to Zoe and figure out what was really going on. 2 days after that conversation, Monica called me back. She said she had confronted Zoe about the inconsistencies in her story. Zoe had admitted that the harassing messages were actually from a different ex-boyfriend who had been bothering her for months. Monica said Zoe had been using my name because she thought it would get more sympathy from family and friends. People knew Zoe and I had just broken up, so it seemed believable that I would be the one causing problems. Monica apologized for believing Zoe's story without checking the facts first. She said Zoe had a pattern of exaggerating situations when she wanted attention or support. This conversation with Monica explained a lot of things. It explained why Zoe's friends had been so quick to leave the group chat when I posted evidence. It explained why Zoe had been so confident spreading her version of events at work. She had been mixing truth with lies in a way that was hard to challenge. Monica said she was going to talk to the rest of Zoe's family and set the record straight. She also said she was going to tell Zoe to stop using my name when she talked about her problems. I haven't heard anything from Zoe or about Zoe since Monica and I talked. Jake said she's been quiet at work and hasn't mentioned me in over a week. I'm hoping this is actually the end of it this time. Update 3. This will be my last update because everything is finally settled. 3 weeks ago, I thought Zoe had moved on and the whole situation was behind us. I was wrong. I got a call at work from someone in HR at Zoe's company. The woman said she was calling to verify employment information for a background check. She said Zoe had listed me as a character reference for a new job application. I was surprised because Zoe had never asked my permission to use me as a reference. The HR person asked me how long I had known Zoe and what I could tell her about Zoe's character and work ethic. I told the truth. I said I had dated Zoe for about 6 months and that I couldn't recommend her for a position that required reliability or accountability. I explained that she had difficulty meeting financial obligations and tended to blame other people when things went wrong. The HR person asked me to elaborate, so I gave specific examples. I mentioned that Zoe had defaulted on rent payments and had tried to manipulate family members when she didn't get her way. I kept my answers professional and factual. The HR person thanked me and said they would be in touch if they needed any additional information. That afternoon, I got a text from Zoe. Just 2 words, "Thanks for nothing." I didn't respond, but I knew she must not have gotten the job. 2 days later, Jake texted me with news from work. Zoe had been served with eviction papers at her new apartment. Apparently, she had missed 2 rent payments and the landlord was starting the eviction process. Jake said Zoe had been asking coworkers if anyone knew of available rooms or apartments. She was also asking if anyone could co-sign a lease for her. Nobody volunteered. The same week, I ran into Megan at a coffee shop. She was alone, which was unusual because she and Zoe used to go everywhere together. I was ordering my drink when she approached me. Megan said she wanted to apologize for what had happened at Zoe's apartment. She said she had been caught up in the group dynamic and hadn't thought about how her comments were affecting me. She said what Zoe had said about me that day was cruel and unnecessary. I thanked Megan for the apology. She asked if Zoe and I might be able to work things out. I told her that ship had sailed a long time ago. Megan said she understood. Then she said something that surprised me. She said Zoe had been asking her and Kelly for money to help with rent and moving expenses. Both of them had said no. Megan explained that Zoe had burned through most of her friendships over the past few months. She had asked different people for different types of help and had gotten angry when they couldn't or wouldn't provide it. Kelly had been asked to co-sign a lease. Lisa had been asked for a loan. Even Jake had been approached about letting Zoe stay on his couch temporarily. Everyone had declined for various reasons. Megan said Zoe was starting to realize that the people she had counted on weren't going to rescue her from the situation she had created. Last week, I got the final piece of closure I hadn't even known I was waiting for. My phone rang at 11 p.m. on Thursday. The caller ID showed the name of Zoe's apartment complex. I answered because I thought it might be related to the old lease somehow. It was a security guard from the building. He said a woman had been in the parking lot for 2 hours, sitting in her car and crying. When they approached her, she had given them my name and phone number and asked them to call me. The guard said the woman claimed to be my girlfriend and said she was locked out of her apartment. He wanted to verify that I could come get her. I told the guard that the woman was not my girlfriend and I would not be coming to get her. I said if she was having a genuine emergency, he should call the police or emergency services. The guard said he would handle it from there and hung up. I never found out exactly what happened that night, but Jake told me the next day that Zoe hadn't come to work. Her supervisor had tried calling and texting but hadn't gotten a response. On Monday, Zoe's supervisor got an email from Zoe saying she was moving back to her hometown and wouldn't be returning to work. She didn't give 2 weeks' notice or explain the situation. Jake said the office was relieved rather than upset. Zoe's work had been inconsistent for the past month and she had been difficult to work with. That was 2 weeks ago. I haven't heard anything about Zoe since then. Jake said someone from HR called her emergency contact to make sure she was okay, and her sister Monica confirmed that Zoe had moved back home. I'm glad she found a solution, even if it wasn't the solution she wanted. Looking back at everything that happened, I realized that walking out of her apartment that day was the right decision. Zoe had shown me exactly how she saw me and exactly how she treated people who cared about her. I gave her multiple chances to treat me with basic respect. She chose not to. I gave her multiple opportunities to take responsibility for her choices. She chose to blame me instead. Some people suggested I should have tried harder to work things out or been more understanding of her situation. But I think there's a difference between supporting someone through a difficult time and enabling someone who refuses to change their behavior. Zoe never apologized for what she said that day. She never acknowledged that her friend's comments were hurtful. She never took responsibility for her financial problems or her housing situation. Instead, she tried to manipulate my family, lied to potential employers about my character, and used my name to gain sympathy from people who didn't know the full story. I'm not proud of every decision I made during this situation. Changing the Wi-Fi password was petty. Posting those screenshots in the group chat was probably unnecessary. But I don't regret standing up for myself. I learned that some people will take as much as you're willing to give, and they'll always ask for more. I learned that being helpful and being useful are two different things. And I learned that walking away from someone who doesn't respect you isn't giving up, it's setting boundaries. Zoe is back in her hometown, probably telling her version of this story to anyone who will listen. That's fine. The people who know me know the truth. I'm done being anyone's free handyman service. I'm done with people who think kindness is weakness and generosity is stupidity. I'm out.